Good evening and welcome to the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority meeting of August 5th, 2013. I'm going to ask everyone here in the audience to please silence their cell phones or put them on vibrate. Thank you very much. This will be a council discussion on the regulation of leaf blowers. The staff report will be made by Christina Gilmore, assistant to the town manager. Ms. Gilmore.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, assistant to the town manager. Before we start, I'd just like to bring notice to the council that there is a desk item on this issue with 2 public comments that were received since Friday afternoon. The purpose of this evening's study session on leaf blowers is to provide the council with information that reviews.
Kim, you actually need to move your label in front of your computer. If you could advance the slide for us now so that the council's not waiting.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this evening's study session on leaf blowers is to provide the council with information that reviews the environmental and health concerns related to the operation of leaf blowers, to provide a survey of leaf blower regulations in Santa Clara County, to identify potential impacts that could arise if a leaf blower regulation were introduced, and to provide options for a leaf blower regulation for consideration. In July 2012, the town adopted a sustainability plan that measured the town's existing greenhouse gas emission inventory, identified greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and established greenhouse gas reduction measures. The possible adoption of a leaf blower ordinance was identified as reduction measure RE4 under the renewable energy and low carbon fuels. The 3 most common complaints of those who are opposed to leaf blowers are noise pollution, particulate matter emissions, and carbon emissions. According to a California Air Resources Board report released in February 2000, the health effects from exposure to leaf blowers range from mild to serious depending upon the exposure time. Because exposure times were not available at the time that this report was written, the CARB study concluded that the health impacts from leaf blower use or exposure could not be conclusively determined. The report also states that potential noise and particulate matter impacts could be reduced by operators with the proper use of appropriate breathing and hearing equipment. In recent years, significant improvement has been made by manufacturers to introduce quieter leaf blowers to the market that are rated as low as 65 decibels or lower. Just so for a frame of reference, 65 decibels is equivalent to a normal conversation at 3 feet. A particulate matter study was completed by the San Joaquin Valley in 2006 that attempted to measure and analyze particulate matter emissions from leaf blowers. The study found that there was little difference in emission factors emitted per square meter of surface between blowing and vacuuming. Sweeping with the broom on concrete created significant particulate matter, whereas sweeping on asphalt did not. And raking leaves did not generate any significant amounts of particulate emissions. The Air Resources Board implemented Tier 2 regulations in 2000 to reduce smog-forming emissions from small off-road engines such as lawn, garden, or other maintenance utility equipment. The current regulations cut current emissions of hydrocarbons and oxides of nitrogen by 74% for handheld equipment. Based on this regulation, there are several manufacturers whose lawn and garden utility equipment, specifically leaf blowers, meets these standards with low polluting 2- and 4-stroke engines. Such examples of manufacturers who produce these types of leaf blowers are still Husqvarna, Fuji, and Honda. There are 2 programs in existence that focus on reducing air pollution from mobile sources such as leaf blowers. The first is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Spare the Air program, which was established in 1991 to reduce air pollution and provide advance notice when air quality is forecast to be unhealthy. During the summer month, BACMed provides a list of actions that residents can take to reduce air pollution. These actions include driving less, taking public transit, carpooling, using a push lawnmower, and using a broom instead of a leaf blower. The South Coast Air Quality Management District has been holding a leaf blower exchange program since 2006. The goal of this program is to replace existing gas-powered backpack blowers with blowers that emit reduced emissions and noise levels. Currently, 4 counties, Orange, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties participate in the program, and to date, a total of 7,500 gas-powered leaf blowers have been exchanged. The South Coast Air Quality Management District estimates that within their region, leaf blowers are used up to 4 hours per week, and with new blowers, they can achieve emission reductions of 65,279 pounds per year. When BACMed was contacted earlier this year to discuss the feasibility of a leaf blower exchange program being implemented within this area, it was communicated by the BACMed staff that this sort of exchange program was not a high priority for the district at this time, and there was no plan in the near or long-term future to implement such a program. The majority of cities in Santa Clara County allow for the use of both gas-powered and electric blowers, but they are limited in their operation during specific hours and/or days of the week. The town currently has an ordinance that restricts the use of electric or gas lawnmowers, leaf blowers, edge trimmers, hedge trimmers, and other similar equipment to the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekends and holidays in residential or other noise-sensitive zones. Powered equipment use in commercial, industrial, and public spaces is not time limited. The city of Palo Alto and the city of Los Altos are currently the only 2 cities in Santa Clara County that currently has bans on gas-powered leaf blowers. Both cities allow electric blowers to be used as an alternative. Palo Alto adopted its current ordinance in 2005. When talking to the police officer who was in charge of the community service officer who enforces this ordinance, it was communicated that the permanent full-time community services officer position that was tasked to enforce this ordinance was eliminated from the Palo Alto budget in 2003-2004. So the enforcement they currently have is not proactive as it was previously, and they do find the ordinance very difficult to enforce. When they had a permanent full-time community services officer to enforce the ordinance, often when they would respond to a violation, the party would have departed by the time the CSO had arrived, and it was often very challenging to get violators to pay the administrative fines that were issued. Los Altos adopted its leaf blower ordinance in 1991. Currently, Los Altos assigns a community service officer or has patrol officers respond to complaints. So they are complaint-based only. In talking to Los Altos staff, they did note that complaints are often difficult to enforce. The officers must see the violation happening in order for there to be enforcement. Many times, by the time the officer or the community services officer arrives at the location, the party is gone or is no longer using the device, and they're unable to complete their investigation. And then, in conclusion, their calls for service for potential leaf blower violations often have a lower priority level to other public safety issue calls that they received. Potential advantages to a leaf blower ban or regulations include reduced mobile sources of noise, reduced gasoline fuel emissions, reduced particulate matter, and possible health benefits to leaf blower operators if appropriate protection is used. There are several issues for consideration if a leaf blower regulation is to be considered. One is opposition from homeowners and landscape professionals who either use electric or gas-powered leaf blowers for home and property maintenance. The second is the financial impact to town operations. A ban or restriction on leaf blower use could have a substantial impact to parks and public works, as leaf blowers are currently used to maintain parks, the civic grounds, and medians and turf maintenance. And the third is enforcement. Proactive enforcement of a ban or restriction would incur additional costs and staff time to respond to complaints and bring violators into compliance. Staff seeks direction from council on possible next steps regarding the regulation of leaf blowers. Potential options for the council to discuss include make no change to the current ordinance, amend the current ordinance to reduce hours and days of operation, prohibit the use of electric or gas-powered leaf blowers that emit 65 decibels or more in residential and commercial areas, adopt a spare the air policy similar to the BACMed policy, and last, pursue options for a regional leaf blower exchange program similar to the one implemented by the South Coast Air Quality Management District in partnership with BACMed. This concludes the presentation, and I'm available to answer your questions.
Before we go to questions, Mr. Larson?
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is a study session, so we're ultimately at the end of your discussion looking for council consensus on which of those possible future options staff should consider and bring back through a public process and ultimately to the council for consideration. So one or more of those you could ask us to consider, preferably not all, just for workload constraints.
And for clarification, other direction that the council might have.
Absolutely.
That is part of or not part of what you have up there.
Absolutely.
All right, now before we get to the public hearing, I'll start with questions of staff based on the staff report. Mr. Brzezinski.
Just a clarification, Ms. Gilmore, and you consulted the folks in the Palo Alto jurisdiction. They indicated that they terminated their CSO in 2003-2004, who was doing the enforcement, and yet they didn't establish the ordinance until 2005. Just curious, was that data gathering on their part current, or was it theoretical?
Yeah, so I understand where the confusion comes in. The current ordinance that is currently on the books in the city of Palo Alto was established in 2005, the current ordinance. They had a previous ordinance that was established earlier than that. So when the 2005 ordinance was adopted, it amended the previous ordinance. So I believe their first pass of that ordinance went into effect in the late 90s. So this is an issue that Palo Alto has been grappling with for many years.
Okay, if I could follow up on that.
Mr.
Madam Mayor.
Brzezinski?
So my understanding from your discussion with Palo Alto is that it's really an enforcement issue for them, and they have not been able to effectively enforce either because the party had vacated the property by the time the officer arrived, or there were other issues that were more significant, and enforcement, therefore, was the issue. They haven't changed their policies as far as you're concerned.
No, as far as I understand, and I communicated with the police officer this afternoon, the ordinance is still in effect. They do attempt to enforce the ordinance as well as they can, but they do have significant staffing challenges. And because the community service officer position was eliminated, the police department responds to any complaints. So they are receiving response on a complaint basis, and they do the best they can to respond to those calls for service that fit into their police priority response.
Thank you.
Ms. Jensen?
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the Palo Alto and Los Altos. I'm curious not about police enforcement, because I think it's fair to assume that people are going to follow an ordinance and that your concern isn't totally enforcement. So one of the things you identified as a concern for us was gardener complaints and homeowner complaints regarding the fact that they would have to switch over from gasoline. Did you question Palo Alto or Los Altos at all with respect to any complaints of that nature that they got? What's their history with that?
So just so I can understand, your question is referring to complaints against homeowners that employ gardeners? No?
No.
Okay.
In your presentation, you indicated that we should be concerned with homeowners who might complain that they have to give up their gas leaf blower, or companies that use gas leaf blowers. We should be concerned with their complaints. What, if any, information did you get from Palo Alto or Los Altos that they had those kinds of complaints? And if so, how many?
I was not able to gather that specific information as to concerns of current homeowners who own leaf blowers who were unhappy to have to not use a gas-powered leaf blower, either in Los Altos or in Palo Alto. From the conversations that I had with the Los Altos police chief and then the brief email exchange I've had with the Palo Alto police chief, the primary concerns that residents have surrounding leaf blowers are twofold. One is noise, and the second is environmental concern. The particulate matter and dust and fecal matter that is kicked up by use of either an electric or a gas-powered leaf blower. So the primary concerns were the ordinances were constructed to address those two primary concerns that most of the residents had. In regards to residents who own leaf blowers, I can only go by anecdotal information that I've heard from researching this in other jurisdictions that currently have an ordinance on the books, and also my time working in the city of San Mateo, where I also worked on this issue. A variety of homeowners own leaf blowers, and they use them to clean out their drains. They use them for maintaining their property, often especially for people who are older and who can't use a rake or choose not to use a rake. So in listing some of the concerns, I was going by information that I had received in my previous job with the city of San Mateo when having researched this ordinance, potential ordinance, and feedback that I had received from residents in that city.
Ms. Jensen? Hold on. Mr. Larson, did you want to answer that question?
And just to add on, based on Christina's experience in San Mateo, researching this in San Mateo counties, we tried to list issues that we thought would likely come up if we did a public process following council direction. And some landscapers being concerned about the loss of leaf blowers we know might happen based on her research in other jurisdictions, or that property owners may not like having to pay more because their gardening or landscaping services have to sweep. So we were just trying to highlight concerns that may come up so you're not surprised later.
Ms. Jensen?
One of the other concerns you highlighted was town maintenance. And under our current noise ordinances, town equipment is exempted from noise and time restrictions. So I don't understand how any change to, and I don't understand, wait, we could ban leaf blowers, and the answers that you just gave me indicated you're thinking about a ban as opposed to powered by a different means, but still have the tool. So if the town equipment is exempted and the council doesn't want to change it, how does that become a concern?
Again, I think we were trying to capture conversations that we've heard from other jurisdictions to highlight for the council. If the council chooses to exempt city operations from any type of leaf blower restriction, then obviously it wouldn't impact operations at this time. But if the council were to, say, choose to ban a certain type of leaf blower or restrict all hours of use regardless of the type of use, then that may have impact on city operations.
Ms. Jensen?
And this is the final one. In the discussions with BACMed regarding the potential exchange program, you indicated that you were told it was a low priority. Did whoever you talked to indicate why, and did they indicate how that might be changed?
Yes, when I talked to numerous staff members at the beginning of this calendar year when I was still employed with the city of San Mateo, my understanding from many discussions with staff is that leaf blowers are not considered to be one of the larger mobile sources of air pollution within this region. They are concerned with vehicles and other larger mobile sources. So leaf blowers just are not currently a priority for the air district, but they did indicate that in the future they may look at instituting a lawnmower exchange program. I would try to be as persuasive as I could to get them to agendize leaf blowers as part of their work plan, and they were quite insistent that it wasn't something that they were willing to consider at this time. I know that the city of San Mateo, they held a study session in early March on this subject, which I helped to prepare the staff report for before I departed and came to Los Gatos. The conclusion of that study session for that council was that the mayor decided and the council decided to work through their regional boards with BACMed to see if there was a way that they could influence from the political side that organization and to get this on their agenda. So while BACMed staff did not give me an indication of how they could this could be agendized on their agenda for future topics, there is at least one city who thinks that this would be a good idea and is willing to work through their political channels with other cities and within the Bay Area to see if this is something that could be brought up.
And that's what option 6 is, to basically be the second city that encourages BACMed to adopt an exchange program.
Further questions of staff? Ms. McNutt?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 or 3, if I may do them all together. It's one of those things where I would have bet money that commercial properties had restricted times, just like residential properties. So that was a surprise. Is that true in other communities, or is that just something weird that's happened or didn't happen in Los Gatos?
It varies from city to city, and it really depends on, I think, in reviewing the cities, how close residential neighborhoods are to commercial areas. So we can do a more extensive review of the different cities' commercial timeframes for leaf blower use, but I believe it varies.
Because in Los Gatos, everything is mishmashed together, and so that's why it was so surprising to me, and also possibly why I hear it so frequently from downtown, from where I am. In terms of the town, I was over in Oak Meadow this morning, and I was trying to picture them sweeping all those paths clear, and it just doesn't seem practical. But I could never see us doing an exception. We don't give ourselves an exception on anything else. We put ourselves through the same permit process. So I think it would not ever be a good thing for the town to say, you can't use this, but we can, you know, we're special. So I don't know where we're going to go on this, but I just think that would be off the table. Do you know about how many complaints we get in Los Gatos about leaf blowers?
I do not.
I mean, do you just anecdotally have a sense of people calling very much? Or
I'll look to Pamela as well, or Sandy, to add. In the 6 years, 5.5 years I've been here, it seems to come in binges, that you see several letters and then nothing for a year and a half, then several letters or calls. Sandy or Pamela, any other experience? Yeah. I've dealt with no referrals that I can recall on leaf blowers. I have seen occasional emails and letters in my...
Okay. Well, that kind of reflects what I
years.
experienced because of all the things I'm harassed about in the grocery store. That's usually not one of them. I can't remember if it was in here on what's the cost of the new model? So, like, if we were to do a replacement, what would be the cost per unit?
It really depends upon the manufacturer. So I did reference the South Coast Air Quality Management District, their program. And so I think the Still BR 500, which is what that air district currently uses for their leaf blower exchange program, retails in the mid $400s, $400 per device. And of course, there's a wide array of leaf blowers, leaf blower vacuum combinations, electric leaf blowers, gas power leaf blowers, battery operated leaf blowers. So it's quite a market. But I think depending upon the type of use, if it's used for commercial use versus a residential use, also is a factor. Commercial leaf blowers are a little bit more powerful and therefore may be a higher cost factor than, a smaller, lower watt leaf blower that's used for a small home.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to Palo Alto and Los Altos, you were talking about the challenge with enforcement, but did you get any information from those jurisdictions as to how many or in numbers or percentage of leaf blowers that were either eliminated or modified or changed from gas to electric? Any information in that vein from either or both of those jurisdictions?
No, I did not. And I don't know if they even have that type of information, but that is definitely something I can follow up on.
Those are just the sorts of issues we would expect to research if the council wanted staff to put effort into this. We've really drawn on Christina's, having done the same work up in San Mateo, to give you a more extensive study session report than we would typically have at this point before receiving council direction to explore the matter.
All right, then before I open this up to public input, any other questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Read in the report that since the invention of these devices, Carmel and Beverly Hills banned them from the outset, I guess you can say. And I just wonder how they've been able to manage all these years without them. I mean, do we have any data or anything on that? Obviously, there's a lot of commercial properties in those jurisdictions.
Yeah, I currently do not have any data on Carmel or Beverly Hills, but in part of my research with the city of San Mateo, I did have extensive conversations with the city of Santa Monica that currently bans all leaf blowers within that city. Their city, similar in size to the city of San Mateo, about 100,000 people. Their leaf blower ordinance has been in effect for many years. It is an ongoing enforcement issue for them. They have dedicated quite a bit of staff to deal with enforcement. If I recall correctly, they have at least a minimum of 3 full-time staff members in their environmental division, I should say. And maybe about half of their time is dedicated to following up on leaf blower complaints. They also do proactive enforcement, where they go out, they divide the city into zones, and they go out and do roving enforcement at different times of the week. They also have an iPhone app that people can report leaf blower violations. So that's just an example of a city that has a very proactive enforcement. I do not recall currently what the costs are for their leaf blower program. I think it is part of their larger environmental division efforts or department efforts. But just in San Mateo alone, when last fall, when the city staff there was exploring a proactive enforcement program, they were averaging anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 a year with just minimum staffing, and then of course 24-hour, 7 days a week staffing if that was what the council wanted. So it can be a costly program, and that is definitely something that staff here can explore if the council desires.
Further questions? Seeing none, we do have the opportunity now for public input on this issue. Is there anyone wishing to address the council? All right, please come forward, give us your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Lee Quintana. I'm sort of surprised that there's so few people here because leaf blowers are a topic that I hear people talking about all the time. I think it is an issue that is more than just an environmental issue in terms of gas. It's a noise issue. And if you spend any time consistently during the week in any one particular place, I will give my house as an example, the leaf blowers are constant or almost constant throughout the day. And you know, it's not only disruptive and makes it difficult to go outside and relax and read a book, but as far as the health concerns go, noise is a cumulative impact. And the higher the noise volume and the longer time, the more that cumulative impact is. So I don't think this should be decided straight specifically on scientific data and decreasing in gas emissions, because we already know that this is, you know, sort of a low apple from the tree that could have been picked before and wasn't. It's not going to make terribly much difference, but every little bit helps at this point. And I have never complained because I've never thought it would do any good, so I think the number of complaints that people get is not a good indication of how important the issue is. I was out of town, so maybe this was noticed in the newspaper, but the first I saw it was when I got the agenda. And in addition to that, one of the questions is cost of enforcement. Well, one suggestion might be to increase the business license to cover the cost of the enforcement. And another somewhat cynical comment I'm going to make is that the town has so many other ordinances that are unenforceable that we don't just delete. What would be the harm of adding this so that at a time when the town did have the resources to enforce it, it was already there and could be enforced?
Questions?
I have one more question. What is the difference in the noise levels of electric versus gas blowers? That's the
Do you have
question.
anything else to add, Lee? All right, thank you very much. Seeing no one else coming forward, I'll close the public input portion of this hearing and look back to the council for direction. Ms. Jensen?
Can I ask a question first to follow up on Ms. Quintana's question? Is there a difference between electric and gas in terms of noise?
For decibel levels, yes and no. So there's a lot of leaf blowers on the market that rate at 65 decibels or lower. Those include electric and gas-powered leaf blowers. In January of this year, the San Mateo City Council held a leaf blower demonstration where we demonstrated multiple types of leaf blowers. We demonstrated leaf vacuums, electric blowers, gas blowers. The electric blower that was used was a Stihl BR 500, I believe, and that was significantly quieter than the gas power blower that they had as a demonstration, and I don't recall what brand or manufacturer that gas power blower was. But the 65 decibel blowers are, while they are quieter, some would say that they're not as powerful. So for any commercial enterprise that is using a leaf blower to hardscape, say a parking lot or a commercial property, a 65 decibel blower may not get the job done as quickly as they would like, and so they would want a blower that might be a little bit higher in decibels. So there's a range there, obviously, and I would have to do a little bit more research for the council to provide that data. But so the answer is a little ambiguous, and I apologize, but it really just depends on the type of a model and the type of manufacturer.
Further questions? Looking for direction? Ms. Jensen?
I'll just start out. Just speaking as one council person, I would like to see Los Gatos pursue some restrictions on leaf blowers. I think it makes sense, particularly since we passed a sustainability plan, which has a policy which indicates that we should do so. And as a town that encourages various small steps towards environmental practices, such as electric charging stations, it seems to me that this is an easy step for us to take. I haven't heard that there's a lot of complaints for or against leaf blowers. I need more information regarding the Los Altos ordinance and what their history is, not with enforcement, but with what happened leading up to the passage of it. Why did Palo Alto need to change its ordinance? What did they think was the problem? What's their history of complaints from residents or gardeners or commercial users of leaf blowers, if any? If there's no complaints, then I don't think we should let that stand in the way of doing something. I agree with Councilwoman McNutt that this council should not exempt the town from requirements on other people. The town is exempted for the time restrictions in our current ordinance. So if we were to change anything with respect to leaf blowers, I would imagine that we'd make it fully applicable to the town because we want to set a good example. I would be curious about how and why and whether BACMed could be persuaded into an exchange program. I'd also be curious about whether that's something the town could undertake. I have no idea, but I'd be interested in that. I'd be interested in more information about the decibel levels and costs of different blowers. I'd also just anecdotally, in walking or riding a bike or doing whatever you want to do around town that's on a sidewalk, if somebody's got a leaf blower, you can't do it because you'll get stuff all over, and it makes a lot of our I've been on the creek trail where there have been leaf blowers out, and it makes it very difficult to pass. So I think there needs to be some kind of timing restrictions that are reasonable. So I'm inclined to want to put some restrictions on, but I would ask for that kind of information that I've just summarized would be my feedback to the staff.
Further discussions, Ms. McNutt?
Thank you, Mayor. The ones that I'm most interested in are numbers 2 and number 5. So I do think that we should look at putting in some set hours on commercial properties, business properties, because they are so interspersed with residential in our community. And I think that would be very helpful, and I don't think it would be too onerous for anybody to have some, and I don't know right now what their behavior pattern is. I don't know how much we'd be asking them to change, but we could hear from them if we propose something. And having, number 5 is the kind of the Spare the Air Day. I would like to kind of expand that into more education. I am not a fan of putting laws on the books that can't be enforced. And when you have a law that can't be enforced, and especially in this case where I'm guessing that 40 or 50% of, I'm making this up, so don't hold me to this, but 40 to 50% of the leaf blower use are by outside gardening, landscaping services that do come, and they're here for 15 or 20 minutes or a half an hour, depending on the size of the property, and then they're gone. That trying to locate them and persuade people who are possibly making less than minimum wage to spend $400 on a new piece of equipment is going to be very difficult to do. And so I would prefer to err on the side of focusing on, not err, but focus on the side of education and persuasion rather than setting up a carrot and stick where there's no stick and there's no carrot. So, what's the motivation for following the law? So, I would like to gently go into this area and not try to do something extravagant that really has no meaning and no impact and no change on people's behavior either in town or providers that are coming in from out of town.
Further discussion? Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the very thorough presentation, Ms. Gilmore. I was amazed that this much material has been generated by government about this topic. And it tells me pretty clearly that either some people have plenty of time on their hands at the Air Board or in some entity, but I don't need to have any more information about this. I'm not asking for more studies. I don't want you to spend any more time doing this, Ms. Gilmore. I think we've got a lot of issues we have to deal with in this town, and I think that the information that you've gathered is sufficient. As far as my concerns or interest in these other agencies that have adopted these ordinances, I agree with Ms. McNutt. I don't want to put anything on the book that is unenforceable. And I think it's really clear from my own inquiries of many of the people in other jurisdictions in our 15 city and town county governments that the ordinance is there, but we pay lip service to enforcement. And I think it's because there are a lot of other things that we need to do that take our time, particularly in the area of enforcement. And I think that's the reason why the Air Board is not that interested. I don't think we're going to persuade the airport to be interested. I think the Air Board is looking at the bigger issues, the greater impacts, and this is not seen as a significant impact. Frankly, I don't think this is seen as a significant impact in our town. I think the reason why there is no one here other than Lee to speak to this issue is not that it wasn't noticed. I think it doesn't have that kind of power. We have no problem getting a full house when we have issues that are of significance to the community. So my sense is that I would be willing to take a look at educational issues, but not to spend an awful lot of time more developing language that says that we are cutting edge in terms of this environmental issue, and focus on those things that are more significant to us. We have a limited staff. We have staff capacity issues that are significant. I feel I'm an environmentalist, and at the same time, I don't feel that this rises to the level of major concern. And frankly, I'll be honest, and some people may not agree with this, but I have a electric leaf blower. I use it. I don't use it when someone's walking down the sidewalk. I don't blow things out into the street. I'm very careful about raking and eliminating debris in my yard, but I cannot see the viability of sweeping all the time. And I think that from the point of view of our community, we like our community to be pristine. And this is one of the ways. It's, things are a trade-off. So my sense is I'm not interested in pursuing this in some kind of draconian fashion. I'm very comfortable with our keeping the limits and forcing, those people who are in violation, the time limits primarily, to deal with this. If we were to be able to do anything, I would direct it towards the gas blowers. That, to me, would be something that we would perhaps pursue, but I don't want to take this to a level that is so significant that it forces us to do an awful lot more staff time on.
Further discussion? Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I look at this as a quality of life issue, and the cities that have been proactive about banning these devices all have a very high quality of life, and I think of Los Gatos as similar in that regard. However, I do realize that enforcement would be difficult, but it would also be up to the individuals who hire their gardeners to spread the awareness. It doesn't have to be that we hire a number of staff people or dedicate a number of staff resources to go out and police this. As people drive and they still talk on their cell phones, you can create laws and you can request that individuals do the right thing, and you empower them to do so. And I would imagine that most of them do choose to follow the rules and follow the laws once the word gets out there. With that said, I also own a leaf blower, an electric version. And ever since I was a kid, I've despised the gas version. From 50 or 100 feet away, I do everything I can to avoid them when I'm riding, walking, whatever, about town. And I do see it as a quality of life issue, a noise issue that detracts from the Los Gatos environment. And then there's a flip side. Of course, our community is nice and clean and tidy, which is also a quality of life, so it's a delicate balance. My recommendations would be to limit the hours. 8 to 8 seems quite excessive. I would think something like 9 to 4 would be sufficient for most gardeners or most crews that come in and work in the neighborhoods. I would also recommend a move towards electric blowers. I know that in all instances that might not be practical, and I know that if we went cold turkey and we adopted something that said electric blowers only, that might be difficult in the near term, but perhaps not over time. And I'm not sure if our staff is capable of going to all electric blowers at this time or not. I would also recommend that we choose one day a week, such as Sunday, and we just say no leaf blowers on Sunday. Give everybody a day of peace, and as opposed to Monday through Friday, 8 to 8. And I know a lot of us like to get caught up on the weekends on our chores and our housework because we're working all week. But we can do that on Saturday, or we can do it next Saturday, or we can do it on Friday evening perhaps. But give everybody a day off from whatever kind of noise on Sunday regarding these devices. So those would be recommendations coming from me. Now I wouldn't how can I say it? Looking for more information, as the other council members said, but not totally looking to. Let's empower the people to, if we do put rules in place, act as their own enforcement body and do the right thing. I'll leave it with that.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I hope you're, pretty soon we're going to be asking you for the consensus that you have been writing down there. As with many of the issues with which the town deals, it's not linear and in its analysis. I would like the town to take some steps, but I don't know what those steps are yet. I agree with Ms. Jensen that I would like more information from Palo Alto, Los Altos, maybe the ones who started out at the beginning with none. Not so much as to the problems or challenges of enforcement, but when they put these ordinances into effect, What information, if any, do they have on what its impact was? Did people start using electric? Did they quit, or reduce their use of gas? I would like the practical information from those jurisdictions. That would help me, as this one council person, to see what direction that I would support going forward. So that being said, Mr. Larson, do you have, first of all, any consensus? And secondly, if not, do you have questions that we can answer so that will lead to a consensus?
Well, I did a little matrix of items 1 through 6, and we have unanimity that item 1 doesn't make sense and don't do anything. Going to where there is consensus, the strongest one was on number 4, which is the prohibiting use of gas blowers. We have both the mayor and Councilwoman Jensen interested in exploring the Palo Alto and Los Altos models to see what voluntary compliance resulted when they implemented their programs, even though we know enforcement was challenging. Maybe there's some voluntary compliance. We had the vice mayor say if there were to be a regulation on leaf blowers, he saw it most likely being on gas blowers. And Councilmember Przinski saying not particularly interested in bans on leaf blowers, but if there were to be consideration, only on gas. So to the extent there seemed to be consensus, it was on number 4, with 4 council members expressing varying degrees of interest in that. The next one is number 2, to amend the current ordinance to reduce hours. And I heard a couple of comments regarding inclusion of commercial and or town properties in operation in some consideration there, as well as from the vice mayor, possibly some reduction of the hours or even days that they might be allowed. So that's kind of the one other place where there was a majority of the council that said some exploration is warranted. There was not a majority of the council that spoke to items 3, 5, or 6. 3 is the banning electric or gas that are higher than 65 decibels. And 4, 5 is the spare the air policy, which is actually a construct we developed here that we'd need to discuss with PACMed. And when they declare a spare the air day, could the town enforce a no leaf blower day? And so we'd piggyback on another process.
All right, given the fact that we're winding our way through our next portion of our meeting, does any council person have any input to staff, to Mr. Larson? Seeing none, Mr. Larson, do you have anything?
Yes. So with council consensus and our tabulation of comments and results, we will focus on the Palo Alto and Los Altos models, as well as the current ordinance and hours and days of operations and properties that should be included in that, and do our research there, probably do some public outreach to validate the concerns that have emerged in other communities to see if those are relevant here, and then bring it back for council direction and or action.
All right, thank you. Seeing none, this portion of the meeting is at end, and the regular council meeting will begin at 7 p.m. oh so quiet ahead of time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the August 5th, 2013 meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority meeting. First of all, I will ask you, remind you, to either silence your cell phone or put it on vibrate. We have previously had a study session, a short break, and now we are beginning our business meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Joe Przynski.
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here?
Vice Mayor Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. At this point, as you all know, or you probably will know soon, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and every week, every meeting, I should say, we ask a stellar young member of our community to come forward and lead us in the pledge. Today, that stellar person is Cameron Borg. I'll ask Cameron to come up here and stand beside me. And I will tell you a little bit about Cameron, or maybe a lot. Cameron Borg is a 6th grader this fall at Union Middle School. She was a 5th grade student council technology expert. She created all of the videos for the assemblies. She won 2nd place in the spelling bee. She participates in EPGY, Education Program for Gifted Youth, Stanford Math Program. She volunteered for Playground Pals, helping young kids make friends. She's a member of Girl Scout Troops. She has been a member of Girl Scout Troop 61302 for 5 years. She has participated in yearly community service events, such as cleaning the church classrooms, volunteering at yearly church festival, and cemetery cleanups. She's played the clarinet and after-school band and participated in Glee Club. Now they're her sports. There's a long list here. The Los Gatos 01 competitive soccer team. She's selected to participate in U.S. Soccer Training Center. Her favorite soccer team of all time was Razzmatazz in 2nd grade with Coach Steve Leonardis. She is the Los Gatos All-Net Basketball, where she played in the championships in L.A., Los Angeles. You went there? She plays for the San Jose Zebraettes 2020 basketball club team. She's an oldest of 3 girls, and she has a cat named Mochi or Moki? Mochi. All right. So at this point, if you'll all stand and please salute the flag with our leader here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give her a round of applause. Give her another round. At this point, we have a presentation from the Tobacco-Free Coalition of Santa Clara County. I will invite Roger Kennedy and associates to come forward and join me.
Up here or here?
Right up here, please. Let the folks in the audience here and on television see you.
Mayor Spector and member of the council. I'm Dr. Roger Kennedy, co-chair of the Tobacco-Free Coalition of Santa Clara County, and I'm also proud to say that I've been a resident and my hometown is Los Gatos since 1977, so it's with particular pride that I introduce Carol Baker to present the award. Carol Baker is my co-chair.
Thank you very much. I was picked talking with some friends this morning, saying what we were going to be doing this evening by giving this presentation to the town of Los Gatos. And they said, well, why are you doing that? I mean, they've always been forward-thinking people, and they've always been in the vanguard of things like this, considering health. And I said, you've said the answer right there. That's why we're doing this. The Tobacco-Free Coalition of Santa Clara County has a certificate of recognition awarded to the town of Los Gatos. The Tobacco-Free Coalition presents this award for their outstanding leadership in reducing the burden of tobacco use and protecting the public's health by passing strong tobacco prevention policies.
Now, I can't let this opportunity pass without requesting that there is more work to be done. And one of the most effective measures to prevent access of kids to tobacco is a tobacco retail license. So I would urge the council to strongly consider, we stand ready and able to give you help with this, which is actually a piece of low-hanging fruit because we've done it throughout the state, throughout the county, and we know how to do this ordinance. And in the future, we were really looking forward to the possibility of smoke-free multi-unit housing. This will be an important issue in order to protect the citizens of Los Gatos from secondhand smoke. So we thank you very much for your wonderful work, and we're looking forward to working forward with you in the future. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the council and the town of Los Gatos, thank you. And again, thank the organization very much for this recognition. Closed session report, Ms. Prop?
Thank you, Mayor, council, members of the public. The council met in closed session this evening as duly noticed on the agenda. Council took no action this evening on any item.
Thank you. A reminder, anyone wishing to address the council this evening on a matter that is on our agenda or is not by way of verbal communications, if you'll please fill out one of these cards and give it to the clerk on my left. Some of you have already done that, but if you haven't done so yet, please do that. Council manager reports. Council matters, and I'll remind the council because you may have forgotten, we have not met since June 17th. And so if you're appointed to any board, committee, commission, if you would please report out to the council and the public as a whole. Anyone have anything to report? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. During our break, I attended a meeting for the Santa Clara County Water District, and I have nothing substantial to report from that meeting, but I did attend a meeting.
Anyone else? Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes, in my role as chair of Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors, we have been meeting during the month of July to select a slate of candidates for the new general manager, which will be appointed before the end of the year.
Thank you. Anyone else? I attended and chaired a North 40 Advisory Committee meeting, and for the benefit of the council as a whole and the public, we are moving forward. We have a draft-specific plan, and the committee is moving forward in reviewing that plan. And also there has been a meeting, one or two meetings of the Policy Committee, where we are in the process of drafting policies or protocol for the public and for the council in the conduct of its public hearings. Mr. Manager.
Mayor and council, a few items. With the resignation of Mazarine Vicaria, our deputy or our clerk administrator and deputy town attorney, we have with us, joining us tonight and through most of September, Kim Smith, our interim clerk administrator who previously served 18 years as clerk for the city of Cupertino before her retirement. And we're fortunate to have her experience helping us during this transition. A few items for the calendar coming up. First, we have reinstalled the new Arts in the Council Chambers. This is a retrospective of work by Peter Carter, who passed away earlier this year and is well known and beloved in the community. And this is also a handoff of the Art in the Council Chamber programs from the town, the Arts and Culture Commission, to the museums of Los Gatos, who we are in partnership with for their eventual operation of the Cultural Center in the old library space. So a reception honoring this exhibit, as well as recognizing both the museums and the town, is scheduled for Wednesday, September 4th at 6 p.m. here in the chambers. A few days later, on Sunday, September 8th, is the Taste of Los Gatos, which is the annual event for the Police Foundation, which provides one-time support for our police department serving both Los Gatos and Montecito, and is a fine event to sample the restaurants of Los Gatos. Last, we have just scheduled the Screen in the Green, which is our annual youth movie in Oak Meadow Park, for September 27th. And in consultation with the mayor, the movie for kids that night and adults will be Brave, a wonderful animation. That concludes staff's report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Larson, and I'm going to be coming back to you soon. The next item on our agenda is the consent calendar. And the consent calendar are those items that will be acted upon in a single motion unless pulled from the agenda by our consent calendar by a member of the public or a member of the council. I will just note now that we have pulled already by virtue of cards in front of me, agenda item 1 by Lee Quintana, agenda item 3 by Jeff Lockridge. I should know it by now. And agenda item 5 by several individuals, but the person who specifically said that they were pulling it from the consent calendar was Bernie Williams. And so, is there anyone from the council that wishes to pull a matter from the consent calendar? Ms. Jensen?
Madam Mayor, I actually have a question regarding item 9. We received a desk item which indicates that there's fairly substantial change to the action that's requested, so I'm wondering if that requires us to pull that item, or we can simply refer to the desk item in the consent calendar.
When we get to the moment, if I may, Madam Mayor, to acting on the consent calendar, I'll introduce the desk items and the changes, so it's part of the public record.
Thank you, and we are almost there. We just had so many things pulled. Does anyone from the council wish to pull anything further? Seeing none. Does anyone from the public wish to pull any other item from the consent calendar? Before we go to a motion, Mr. Larson, would you please tell us what desk items we have on the consent calendar? Not only the consent calendar item, but briefly what they say.
Great. Yes. The one item that remains on your consent calendar is item 9, which is the approval of the Parks and Public Works project for hillside road repair and resurfacing. We are not recommending any change in the contract approval. In fact, staff believes it's a very advantageous contract, and the bidding was quite successful. Plus, we'd like to get the work done before it starts raining. So we're recommending the contract to go ahead. However, due to new information received just on Friday regarding the original planned source of funds, we are recommending that the funding source be changed from an anticipated OBAG grant, which is a One Bay Area grant coming through MTC, to instead the source of funding being the town street reconstruction project funds, which we have sufficient funds in that account to let the project go forward. Then our plan is, with the new regulations that were just released on Friday, we'll take likely Shannon Road, but that analysis is not complete, other street reconstruction projects that would have been funded, and use the grant funds for that. So the action remains the same before you, except to change the source of funding as indicated in the staff report. I will also mention, since a number of people pulled item number 5, from the consent calendar, that we did have a desk item submitted to you that I'll just reference more for the audience before we get to that matter, which includes both some public comment as well as notification to the council that the fee resolution that was included in that item setting the fee for a new firearms dealer permit is being postponed for further notice to the public and council, likely at one of your September meetings. But the recommended ordinance is before you for your second reading and second action.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Question of Mr. Larson? Seeing none. May I have a motion on the remaining consent calendar items? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Move to approve the consent calendar with the exceptions of items 1, 3, and 5, inclusive of the desk items.
Ms. Jensen? All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. I'm going to call these consent calendar items in order. As I said before, the person who pulls it from the consent calendar will come forward and give us his or her reason for doing so. The first one is agenda item 1, approve council minutes of June 17th, 2013, was pulled by Lee Quintana. Ms. Quintana, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Lee Quintana. I'm requesting that changes be made to the minutes to more accurately reflect the statements by the public during the June 17th meeting on the Albright PD. I have, I think you have gotten a copy of my suggested changes. They involve changes to the summary for myself, John Shepherdson, John Vanetta, and Ann Robertson, and in addition to one of the statements by Greg Larson, the town manager. And I can read those to you if you like, or you can read them yourself. But that is my request, that the minutes be modified to reflect this language.
All right, thank you. Do we have questions for, yes, Ms. Jensen?
Ms. Quintana, I'm looking at your written submission, and what you've put under Mr. Vanetta, it says, what does the 57% refer to? Is that your question, or is that something that you are saying that he said?
That is my question of the summary, because it refers to 57% reduction, but it doesn't say of what.
Okay.
So his comment is not really understandable.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Quintana. All right, so agenda item 1 has been pulled for the reasons as stated. Is there anyone, well, let me ask Mr. Larson, at this point, should I look to the council for a discussion of this item before I open it up for public testimony, or what would you suggest on the process?
Assistant Town Manager Jacobs could respond to the 57% question. As for the recommended changes to the minutes, we don't believe they're necessary, as what the council typically approves is what in the industry is called summary minutes, and the full comments by the public and council are available on the town website and through the videotaped recordings of all council meetings. The comment attributed to me is accurate, but it is stated in the minutes later, so we didn't feel it was necessary to state both places. If the council were to proceed with these changes, I would also ask that my name be spelled correctly.
All right, and are you suggesting that that Ms. Jacobs give her input at this point?
Just to clarify what Mr. Vanada's question was, I did go back and listen to it, and he was asking why the town charges 57% of the amount for road impact fees that other cities charge.
Questions of staff? Ms. Jensen?
Mr. Larson or Ms. Jacobs, is there any contention that the changes that Ms. Quintana is suggesting are not accurate?
I don't believe staff has verified these recommended changes at this point in time. This came in after the desk item deadline.
Further questions of staff? Seeing none, does anybody else wish to address us on this agenda item on the issue raised by Ms. Quintana? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public input portion of this hearing and look to the council for a motion on agenda item 1. Mr. Przinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the clarification that Ms. Jacobs gave us regarding the Vanata comments could be included so that the 57% is referenced to the roads issue. So as far as the motion, I will make a motion that be included. I do believe that as I look at the extended insertion that Ms. Quintana is recommending versus what our summary statements are, I think the summary statements are more in keeping with our protocol regarding minutes, and so I would not recommend that we include that recommended extension of her comments. Again, the entire comment is available to our public should they choose to access it electronically.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Ms. McNutt?
I'll second.
All right, and the motion is to approve with the modification of the addition regarding Mr. Van Natta as verbalized by Ms. Jacobs. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So just for clarification, if we were to vote in favor of the motion does not include the items submitted by Mrs. Quintana in the desk item, or do we include that as part of the motion inclusive of the desk item, I guess?
As I understand the motion, it is not include all of the issues raised by Ms. Quintana with the exception of expanding upon Mr. Van Natta's statement. Is that correct, Mr. Larson?
That is how staff interpreted the motion.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. Ms. Jensen voting no. We are now on agenda item 3. And that has been pulled by Mr. Loffridge, and I will ask him to come forward and tell us the basis for him pulling this from the consent calendar.
My name is Jeff Lockridge. I'm requesting that we choose someone other than Mr. Przinski for this position. And I mean, do you want me to talk about it or not right now?
Yes, this is your opportunity to
Okay.
explain why.
Item number 3 on tonight's consent calendar involved appointing our town voting delegate for the League of California Cities annual conference in September. This brings up something that I had questioned several months ago regarding the town's representative to ABAG, MTC, VTA, and others. At that time, the suggestion that I made was to have our representative give some kind of report on what was going on from our town's perspective in regards to some of the major issues that all Northern California towns and cities are all having to deal with right now. I'm really not sure how we're being represented, as there seems to be no follow-up or reports about any of these recent development meetings. I attended the Plan Bay Area meeting several weeks ago and was disappointed that our representative did not show up, so was not part of the vote. How do our town representatives gather information or opinions from the town citizens in order to represent us? Is this a town representation or is it a personal representation? I've never been personally asked how I feel about some of these important issues. I've also been unable to find anyone who knows enough about something as important as one Bay Area to even have an opinion on it. So how are we being represented? I thought it was normally the mayor who went to one of these meetings. If not the mayor, then maybe the vice mayor would be a good choice. I, for one, would suggest that we should be sending someone who is fairly new and responsive to the needs of the community and could benefit from exposure to all the state delegates. The town of Los Gatos has an opportunity to affect the outcome of some of these major issues, whether through active participation and discussion or by voting. Is the town being kept informed on what is being discussed or what is being voted on? Can someone please explain that process to me? Because I don't understand.
Thank you. Before we turn it over to other folks who may want to address us on this issue, does the staff have any input?
Yes, Mayor and Council, the speaker spoke to two issues. The one before you tonight and on your agenda is the appointment of your representative as the voting delegate at the League of California Cities annual conference. The business meeting will be on Friday the 20th. There are two matters being considered at that business meeting. Both of those resolutions were in your packet. One deals with funding for prioritization of water bonds for water conservation, groundwater recharge, and reuse of stormwater. And the other one is from the League's Public Safety Committee to work with the California Police Chiefs Association on the realignment underway at the state. So those are the two matters that will be addressed by your voting delegate at the League conference meeting on September 20th. We did not receive indication that any other council member was planning to attend the League meeting or available to serve as the delegate. That's why we didn't list an alternate. But typically we appoint every year at this time both a delegate and an alternate. And at this point in time, the only member of the town council or town staff that will be at that meeting is Councilman Joe Przynski. As to the broader issues raised, every December the mayor proposes and the council approves a set of appointments to all regional and town boards and commissions, such as the VTA Policy Committee and other bodies. And that's a council action that occurs every December.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else who wishes to address us on agenda item 3, specifically as to the issue raised by the individual who pulled it from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, I'll close the public portion of this hearing and turn to the council for comments or a motion. Mr. Przynski.
I won't make a motion, but I do want to clarify. As far as that July meeting, I was in Europe at the time, and my alternate was at that meeting in my place.
Do we have a motion? Ms. McNutt.
Move approval of item 3.
Do we have a second? Mr. Przynski. No, you're not Mr. Przynski. You're the Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'll second the motion.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, then there's agenda item 5 has been pulled from the consent calendar. Agenda item 5 is to adopt an ordinance adding a new section 12 to chapter 14 to the town code titled Firearms Dealers, Sale of Firearms and Ammunition to require a permit process for the sale of firearms, ammunition, and or explosive devices. As Mr. Larson pointed out, a portion of that dealing with fees is not before us this evening, I will look to the person who most clearly said she was pulling it from the consent calendar and get the reasons for that, and that's Bonnie Williams.
Yes, thank you once again. I'm here on behalf of all the hundreds of people who showed up here in the last months and months of meetings to discuss the topic, and I think we just need further public discussion today on it. We're just not going to let it go by again. We just hope you start listening to us. We just don't want another fee imposed on them. So I just think we need discussion. There's several people here to discuss it today. Please. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm going to go through all the folks who pulled this from the consent calendar. Jess Guy, followed by Robert Shackelford. Mr. Guy, do you have anything to add? All right, so from the, let the record reflect that Mr. Guy is not going to be speaking. Mr. Shackelford, if you could come forward, please. Followed by Steve Quinn.
This will get our 3 minutes to come, right? Or is this like our only time to talk on this?
I'm sorry, this is your only time. Ms. Williams, you want to come forward?
Yes. I didn't realize
Okay.
that. Sorry. I that was just justification for pulling it. I just want to point out, Templar's been here at least 8 months, and I'm not aware of any problems that they have caused on the community. So we have a precedence here if things are going well. Anything where the issues in the beginning were people trying to do things against them, and I don't know if anything has been done against that half of the voting people in Los Gatos. So we should prove that, everything's going well with them. And then just the thought of imposing another $4,000 fee on them just for a permit, when we have the state, we have the federal government, doing the licensing, and now at the lowest level we want to impose another fee on them or a tax. At $4,000 is a lot of money. And they are a business generating, we get a portion of the sales tax that they're generating to our community. And I'm sure, if you were to impose this on it, we should consider how much money they're generating for the town also. So if you want to impose something like $4,000, we ought to, negate that by the $4,000 they're going to collect in sales tax for you. We cannot afford more empty buildings in this town. Look at King's Court. We have, where the Hallmark used to be, where the Wolf Camera used to be. We just don't need more and more empty buildings here. And they have not caused us any problems in the 8 months here. So this moving forward is just to penalize them because people are still afraid of guns. And I don't think you're in the business here of penalizing people for those kind of reasons. Again, it would just be an unfit thing to discriminate upon their particular business, and we just don't need more fees imposed on them. I think at this rate, we're driving them out of town. We're going to lose that revenue. We just don't need that. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Guy? You have, all right. You have 3 minutes. Well, it's so generalized right now, so you have 3 minutes to talk about agenda item 5.
All right, thank you. I've read Jess Guy, 14275 Mulberry in Los Gatos. I read through the ordinance, and actually, as much as I hate to say it, for the most part, it is reasonable. However, there are some issues I have with it that I think are pretty serious. The ordinance, again, as to the fee, directs the Director of Community Development to conduct an investigation relative to the lawfulness of the business as applied to zoning, and yet we still don't have a zoning protocol. From what I understand, that's still in the works, which directly impacts back to the $4,000. I don't see how they can justify any sort of a processing fee without knowing where we're coming from on the zoning process. Also, the proposed ordinance defines destructive device. It refers to 18 U.S. Code and the California Penal Code. And I'm sure that whoever drew this up is aware that both the California Penal Code and the federal code as to destructive device are not consistent with each other. There is a difference, especially as to firearms. And I don't think that they meant to have a definition of destructive device as a third definition as opposed to the state definition, the federal definition, and the town definition. So someone should look into that. The other aspect that bothered me was the definition of firearm in and of itself. It actually expands the definition as found under federal law, and it expands the definition as found under the California Penal Code. I think that area is preempted. I don't think it's legal for the state to, or for the town of Los Gatos to expand any definition of firearm. It's your law. If you pass it, that's what you'll live with. But there will be some issues down the road. Section 14.130.020 requires a permit for infrequent sales or transfers of firearms or ammunition. However, there's no definition of infrequent. That makes that law both vague and arbitrary. It's a law that cannot be enforced, as Councilmember McNutt originally identified. You're also going to deny a permit for anyone employed in a firearms business who may have a conviction for any theft. That can impact a lot of juveniles who might have a shoplifting theft and 20 or 30 years later want to get a job in a store like this. That's okay. That doesn't conflict with state or federal law. It just seems to be a little bit overbroad. The $4,000 fee that was discussed earlier appears to be also required for renewal. I think that is somewhat superfluous. And 14.130 or 045 is duplicate of California Penal Code, so you're going to be redundant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Robert Shackelford, followed by Steve Kwan.
Good evening. Once again, I am a resident of San Jose, California, and the only reason I present myself here in the town of Los Gatos is as a matter of principle. As I stated in the last meeting when I went through ordinance doing a substitution exercise, the details of the ordinance were revealed as something created by the thought police. And what do I mean by thought police? When the thought police are present, what they're trying to do is they're trying to single out a business or associates or individuals as a suspect class who will have their papers demanded of them, their permits demanded of them on a regular basis without any real due reason for it, other than someone has a fear or distaste for the activity they participate in. But the main reason why I come here is because the Second Amendment has no jurisdictional boundaries. It is the law of the land. So it doesn't matter whether I come from San Jose or Los Gatos or Sunnyvale and so on. I am here to defend the rights at all levels, including economically, of those people whose rights are being infringed upon. That's why I'm here. If your whole purpose here was to talk about capacity in terms of number of people in the floor space, or about whether a firewall is in place to protect the compressor from the retail establishment visitors, or whether or not the food codes are being met and so on, I wouldn't be here. Because you're already allowed to do all those kind of things. You're allowed to set your own thresholds and establish your own standards and establish your own designations as to where residential is, where light industrial is, and so on. I can respect that. It's not my business if I'm a resident of San Jose. That's the business of Los Gatos. So my primary reason for you to remove this item from the consent calendar is very simple. Your job is to uphold and defend and promote freedom and liberty, nothing else. That's all there is to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Steve Kwan.
Members of the City Council, I believe this is about the fourth meeting I've been here in regards to the subject of Templar sports. And when I previously had left the meeting, I thought that Templar sports was basically given the go-ahead and it was basically sanctioned that they could do business in the community. However, it seems like rather unfair to retroactively have them go through this vetting process about ammunition and so forth, and having them incur a $4,000 fee each year. There has been a track record already of 8 months of no problems concerning the merchandise that Templar Sports sells, and I feel that that this proposed ordinance would be just an additional burden upon a small business that supports this community of Los Gatos. And as you know, small businesses are basically the engine that drives the American economy, so why put a further burden on Templar Sports? So I urge you not to support this ordinance that would cause Templar Sports to incur $4,000 a year. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last card I have on agenda item 5. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to address us? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public input portion of this hearing, and I'll look to the council for questions of staff, discussion, motion. Ms. Jensen.
I'd like to make a motion that the council adopt the attached ordinance in our packet, which is new section 13 to chapter 14 of the town code, to require a regulatory permit process for the sales of firearms and ammunition. I will not address item 2 on our staff report indicating the fee. As I understand it, that's not before us and will be noticed for a new hearing.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Jensen, seconded by Ms. McNutt. Discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So We're not talking about the fee this evening whatsoever, so just to further clarify that, we will talk about that at a future time. Okay, thank you.
That is correct. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
And Madam Mayor, if I can just clarify, given one public comment, that the matter before you tonight was a regulatory permitting process that was adopted by the council unanimously at the first hearing in June. It is not a land use matter and does not affect the land use determinations related to Templar or any other firearms store in Los Gatos.
Thank you. All right, we're now at verbal communications. If anyone wants to address us on verbal communications, you'll have 3 minutes. Please submit a card. Several of you have. Natalie Ladd, if you'll please come forward, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Natalie, and I've been a resident here for 14 years. I want to start out by thanking every single one of you on a matter that we brought to the council in 2006, 2007, when Bay Tree Apartments were
Right, please, thank you.
When Bay Tree Apartments requested to convert to condo, and all of you guys represented us tenants and stuck up for us, and I want to thank you very much for that. Since then, a lot of things have happened. The town has a rent control of 5%, and Bay Tree Apartments have found a loophole in the rent control ordinance. There is something in there called a pass-through clause, which enables the landlord to increase the rent above and beyond the 5% based on improvements that they made to the property. What they've done since the approval of the condo conversion, I have personally, in the last 4 years, have been given notice to increase my rent from 10 to 15% every year. I have gone to mediation 4 years in a row, and this is my second year I'm going to arbitration. Since then, every time they serve me with a notice to increase my rent, they don't give justification of how they came up with those costs. And what they do is they just give you an increase. You go to mediation. They still do not give you the breakdown. You have to go to arbitration in order to get the breakdown. And since I've gone to arbitration, I have found some of these prices to be dramatically inflated. The loophole in the ordinance is there is a formula on how to calculate the formula of how to pass on the expenses, but there's nothing in the ordinance that says that they have to pass it on evenly to everybody. So what's happening is there's units there that have been remodeled that are about $1,000 more a month than my unit is, because I've lived there for 12 years and it's not remodeled. And what they're doing is they're hitting the tenants with the non-remodeled units with these inflated increases. It's their way of forcing the previous tenants out, because as soon as we move out, they could remodel those units and get like $1,000 more. And I feel like they're forcing the tenants out that were standing here before you in 2006 when they got approved for the condo conversion. I have gone through Project Sentinel and spoke to a couple of staff members that have been very helpful, but at the end of the day, there's the ordinance, and that's what the arbitrator has to go by. What I'd like to ask the council to do is to either revisit this matter and maybe amend the ordinance, or appoint a council or some kind of a committee. There used to be a rental advisory committee that no longer exists. Right now, everything that's going to Project Sentinel, they handle it properly, but it is an outside company outside of Los Gatos, and because it's confidential information, none of the results are coming back to town. So I would like council to be aware that you have no idea how many people are going to mediation or arbitration and what is happening. So I'd like to ask the council to be more involved in this in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Ladd. Does anybody on the council have a question of Ms. Ladd? And staff have any input?
We appreciate Ms. Ladd's work with our housing senior planner, Erwin Ordonez. And also I wanted to let you know that the chief building official, Michael Machado, has the building permit information that you requested available for your review tomorrow morning if you wish.
I actually already met with him today and have that
Perfect,
information.
good.
Like I said, they all have been very helpful.
So thank you. Our housing staff has plenty of work on their lap through the end of the year implementing the housing element. If the council wants to look at further changes to the rental housing ordinance, I would recommend it be considered in your January work plan study session, whether or not it rises to a priority with other competing projects.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Ladd.
Thank you. And I would be more than happy to be a part of any kind of committee if you guys choose to form one.
Well, thank you for that, too.
Thank you.
All right, the next verbal communication card I have is V. Hong.
Yeah, sure, okay. And that would be also given for them because I have it ready for the city council members as well. Okay. Okay then, okay. Okay, so hello City Council of Los Gatos. My name is V. Hong and I come to you from the city of San Jose. I'm a resident from San Jose and also part of the menthol and flavored tobacco regulation work group. Prevention Addiction Work Group under the larger Santa Clara County Public Health umbrella. You actually just received an award from us earlier this evening. So I just wanted to also notion another project and endeavor under this county as well. If you would look into the folder, you'll see in the flap, the two flaps, the project itself on the right flap, the first page, is just a description about the project itself. It is to prevent especially youth and young adult addiction with candy, menthol, and fruit flavors. Back in 2009, the FDA banned flavored cigarettes, with the exception of these menthol and flavor and candy tobacco products that you see on the left flap. The left flap includes examples of candy flavored and also very colorful, eccentric examples of what has been used to lure youth and promote youth tobacco addiction. So back onto the right flap, second page, you will see other Bay Area cities, counties, assemblies, senators, and also community-based organizations that have proposed a resolution, and that is a support letter to the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to urge the FDA to better regulate these products for the community, especially toward youth. Some examples include Saratoga this past June, and also San Jose this past April. You'll also see assembly members such as Rich Gordon, Senator Ellen Corbett, and other assembly members and senators as well. So I just wanted to provide this folder for you all, and to, as myself as a young adult, urge that the city of Los Gatos also join in creating a resolution, because the deadline for public comment and our verbal communications for an upcoming agenda meeting in Sacramento in the capital of California will be on the 23rd. So that'll be the last date that we'll be submitting these resolutions. So I want to say thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we can motion on and make sure that the health of our youth and young adults and just also this community is a priority in just counties and communities across California. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so then this is the last verbal communications card I have. Looks like Jonathan M. Roberts. If you want to speak to us under verbal communications, please submit a card. Mr. Roberts, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Roberts. I want to present an idea. I had this idea a few years ago. A friend of mine got me into European and other country or other areas graffiti art, and I wanted to spray paint or possibly do multiple color paint pictures of animated cartoon character cats on the yellow caution signs. There's like 18, 20 of them approximately, and was wondering if it was possible if I maybe do one that turns out to be really good and present it to you. You could get your approval to have that done instead of doing it illegal, because then that would be the penalty and consequences for that are a bit absurd.
Questions for Mr. Roberts? See none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I have no further cards on verbal communications, but if anyone would like to come forward No one coming forward, then we will close verbal communications and move on to public hearings. The first item on public hearings is agenda item 11, abatement of hazardous vegetation brush. Sub A, conduct public hearing to consider objections to hazardous vegetation brush. And sub B, consider objections and orders re hazardous vegetation abatement brush. I understand that staff report will be made by Kevin Rouhani. Mr. Rouhani.
Mayor Spector, members of the council, as a part of the annual hazardous vegetation program back in May of this year, May 6th, Town Council passed a resolution declaring brush as a nuisance, a vegetation nuisance. And over the past few months, Santa Clara Fire Department, in conjunction with the town, has been working on abating with a number of properties the hazardous vegetation brush. This work has been completed. We have not received any objection, neither has the fire department. Tonight we have with us Deputy Fire Marshal Curtis Ruel, in case if there's any question. As a conclusion of your public hearing, if there's any objections, we would hear, but the staff recommendation is that any objection be overwritten by the council. This concludes our report.
Questions for Mr. Rouhani? Seeing none, I have no cards, but this is a public hearing. Does anyone wish to address us on this matter? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public input of this hearing and look to the council. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I move to overrule the objections and order the hazardous vegetation abatement.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Leonardis, seconded by Mr. Przinski. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item 12, abatement of hazardous vegetation weeds. Sub A, conduct public hearing to consider the report of the County Agricultural Commissioner's Office on the abatement of hazardous vegetation weeds for the 2012-13 season, and B, consider approval of said assessment report. Once again, Mr. Rouhani will be making the report for the staff. Mr. Rouhani.
Yes, Madam Mayor, again, this is the second part of our hazardous vegetation weed. This program the council initiated last fall. Over the past many months, the County Agricultural Commissioner's Office has been working with a number of properties in Los Gatos to address the abatement of the weeds. This work has been completed. Tonight is the final assessment report from the County Agricultural Commissioner's Office for your review and approval. If you approve the expenses that the county contractor has informed, that will be put on a tax roll for those properties. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Rouhani. Questions of Mr. Rouhani? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. I do not have a card, but does anyone wish to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to the council. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I move to approve the assessment report as noted in attachment 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Leonardis, seconded by Mr. Przinski. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item 13. Zone change application Z13001, project location 234 and 236 Los Gatos Boulevard, property owner Michael Black, applicant Tony Jeans, THIS Design. This is to consider a request for approval to rezone 2 properties from O to R1D. Staff report, I understand, is from Jennifer Savage.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. The properties at this time are zoned O and are asking to be rezoned to R1D. The properties that surround the subject lots are R1D and R18. The rezoning would bring the properties in conformance with the general plan and make them more compatible with the surrounding properties. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Questions of staff? Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Savage, I just wanted to make sure that the only thing that the council is considering tonight is a zone change, not a what would be built on the lot, the design of that, or anything else, and that would come forward to Planning Commission at an appropriate time, correct?
Only the zone changes under your consideration tonight. The design may or may not go to the Planning Commission. It does depend on the scope of the design.
Further questions? All right, seeing none. I don't actually have a card on this. Maybe I do. I do. Michael Black. And this is the only card I have. If anyone else wants to address us, please submit a card. Mr. Black.
Hi, Mayor and council members. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Michael Black, the applicant. I've read through the staff report, and we don't really have too many questions. We support their findings, and I'm really here to answer any questions you might have.
Council, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else wish to address us on this item who has failed to submit a card? I see no one coming forward, and I'm going to assume, Mr. Black, that you don't want to rebut yourself. Is that correct? Okay, good. I will then close the public hearing or public testimony portion of the hearing and turn it to the council for a motion or discussion or questions. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I would like to move to adopt the required findings in Attachment 1 and approve the zone change, and then waive the reading of the zone change ordinance, and then introduce the ordinance to effectuate the zone change.
And Mr. Larson, were you going to jump in and say anything?
I would just recommend the clerk read the title prior to the vote. It's
prior to the vote? All right.
Given
so
they were done all encompassed.
we have a motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Brzezinski?
Second with a clarification.
Yes.
Does this include the acceptance of the Planning Commission's minutes and recommendations? As attachment
Yes.
to? Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Before we go to a vote, I would ask the clerk to read the title.
This is the first reading of the ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the zoning map from O to R1D for properties located at 234 and 236 Los Gatos Boulevard.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. I am going to, we are now on agenda item 14. I'm going to place agenda item 14 at the end of our agenda and move on to item 15. And if I forget about 14, somebody please remind me. I think that's the vice mayor's job. All right, we are on agenda item 15. This is the annual renewal of agreement for services with the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce to manage the town's information center and coordinate the Leadership Los Gatos program. This item was continued from June 17th, 2013. It was pulled from the consent calendar at that time by Ms. Jensen, and I'm going to look to her unless, Ms. Jacobs, you have more to add.
No, at this time, I'll just state that we have provided answers to council questions in both an addendum provided with the council packet and today in a desk item.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Ms. Jensen.
I have a question with respect to a statement in the desk item. On page 2, first paragraph, the staff report says, staff believes that provision of these services at the Civic Center would not likely be as convenient or cost-effective as the services historically provided by the Chamber. My question is, why does staff believe that?
As to the convenience, the Chamber of Commerce located downtown gets many visitors that are in town for the day, and residents also know to go to the chamber. So even though downtown is quite close to Civic Center, we walk between the two places often. It would not be as convenient for people located in downtown to come to Town Hall to ask those questions. In addition, the chamber is open on some Saturdays, and so they are available to answer questions of visitors in downtown on Saturdays. And of course, Town Hall would not be open on Saturdays. As far as the, pardon me, the cost effectiveness of it, the funds that we provide to the chamber supplements other funds that they receive to provide these services. If we were to use the same amount of services to provide the services through town staff, we wouldn't really be able to provide the level of service because it really wouldn't buy much town staffing to answer the volume of questions that the chamber receives on a daily basis through both phone and walk-in.
Further questions? All right, seeing none. This is a public hearing. I don't have any cards on agenda item 15. Does anyone want to address us on this matter? No one coming forward. I will close the public input of this hearing or this agenda item and look to the council for discussion, questions, or motion. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since I'm the person that pulled this item, I should explain why. And part of my explanation is going to involve a request for more information. I pulled the item because I was concerned at what I perceive to be a large cost item for our budget, particularly in how we're budgeting things now and where we're cutting staff. I wanted to understand how Chamber of Commerce services were not duplicative of town services, and I really haven't heard that answer, I have to say. And I further wanted to know, what did our economic vitality coordinator do? What did the chamber do that couldn't be done by our economic vitality coordinator? What services did the chamber really provide? We got in our staff report an indication that there were maps, pamphlets, etc. I would be curious to see what those are. We haven't seen any exemplars. I know by going to the chamber website, the map is a Google map. It refers to maps of a private company. If I go to the town website, I get referred to the chamber, but I also get a list of things that our economic vitality and business services will provide to businesses. So I wonder what the value of the dollar we're paying the chamber is. And I wonder if that could be better spent by making our economic vitality coordinator a full-time person. I understand that things have been done the way they've been done for a while, but I don't know why we should continue that without getting an examination of actually the cost benefit to the town, because I haven't really seen specifics of how that would work. With respect to Leadership Los Gatos, I think that's a great program. I think that when the presentations are done, they're done primarily by staff people. So I'm wondering what the value add of the $10,000 to the chamber is on that. I don't have those answers. I'm not saying that I want to cut off funding for the chamber. I'm just saying I want the chamber or the town to tell me why that's something that I should be happy about spending, given that I know that we have an economic vitality coordinator.
All right, I think that was a question of staff.
Yes, I'll try to provide some additional information regarding the services that the chamber provides versus what our economic vitality coordinator provides. They are quite different. Our economic vitality coordinator is focused on providing assistance to businesses, either ones that are already located here wanting to expand, ones that aren't located here and are interested in doing so, and and as part of doing that, works with the brokerage community to make matches, provides resource referrals for the business community, coordinates mayoral business outreach meetings. So it is focused on the business community in general. The services that we get from the chamber through this agreement aren't really focused on businesses. Their member services that they provide from their membership dues are, of course, business related, but what they do for the town is really not. It really is focused on the visitors, the residents, the new residents. Somebody interested in having a wedding in Los Gatos, and they're going to the chamber to get a list of photographers and caterers and locations for their wedding in Los Gatos, and those are not services that the town provides, and nor would it be best for the town to provide those, as those aren't our core services or core service, but they are important to be provided to visitors and residents. And the dollar value of $35,000 for them to provide the information center that they also have other funds contributed towards would not be enough for us if we wanted to take on those services, which again aren't really core services for the town. And if we've even doubled the economic vitality position, it would cost more than $35,000, or if we hired another person, that would be not enough to cover that. As far as Leadership Los Gatos, there is quite a bit of effort involved in doing the recruitment for Leadership Los Gatos, managing that process, and doing the coordination of all the programs, as well as the logistics. And that's what we're paying them, the $10,000 coordination fee. The other $5,000 of that it includes town staff going through the program, as well as any costs associated, up to $3,000 associated with the meals and such that aren't covered by the it's called not the membership, the registration that the individuals pay. So there is quite a bit of work connected with that is outside the actual session where somebody is sharing information about the town and its services.
Further questions? Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I do need to disclose that my business is a member of the chamber. I'm not sure if there are other people on the dais who are also a member of the chamber, but I have nothing to do with the running of the organization. I am, over the last dozen years, 11 years as a council member, and then before that as a member of the chamber, very familiar with what it is that they do, and I can understand coming in new how it's good to ask questions because you're not familiar with it. But I do believe that the value that the town get from the chamber is a lot more than the money that we put in. I can tell you that in 2000, when I was president of the chamber back in the day, we tallied at that time that the chamber was receiving 450 calls a month of general inquiry, and about 50% of those calls were from Los Gatos residents. I have coordinated a lot of special events, and the actual time in the event or a speaker, you have to triple, quadruple, whatever 6 times is, for the number of hours to do the coordination. It's really a hassle to take care of all of the details of getting a bus there on time, making sure that there's refreshments and bottles of water and handouts and all of that kind of gruesome detail that I don't think that we want our staff to take care of. So what I would suggest is, because this is so late in the game for this fiscal year, that we go ahead and approve the contract, and then the council members who want to do some background catch-up homework and get more familiar with the chamber do that over the coming months. And I'm sure the chamber director is here today, that she would love to have council members come down and staff the phones for a while or answer the people who wander in and hear the interesting questions that they come up with, and just kind of experience what that information center is all about. So given that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to renew that contract with the Chamber that is outlined in our agenda item number 15.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes, I'm very comfortable with the services provided by the Chamber. I remember when I first came on council in 1998, we did not have a very strong Chamber. It was in its growth process. I think that it has definitely evolved significantly under leadership since that time. And I visit the Chamber offices frequently, so I'm very familiar with the materials that are available. They go way beyond Google Maps. It has everything to do with the kind of presence in the community that the Chamber represents. And I do think from my own interactions with my compatriots in the community that they feel the Chamber is very effective in delivering service. I think considered one of the best chambers in the Valley at this point in time, a model chamber. And I think that, once upon a time, there was kind of an attitude that, well, we have to ignore business because we're all, it's this business folks don't vote. I actually heard that as a direct quote from a previous person who was on council once upon a time. But that was the residuals of a period of time when there was really an anti-business orientation. And that has long since passed appropriately. And I think what we've got now is a really good working relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, our business community, and our neighborhoods. And they all seem to work really well together. I applaud the Chamber for its role in that. I applaud all of the members of staff who have helped facilitate that over the years. And I think that from my perspective, I want to just refer also to the question of the Leadership Los Gatos program, because I was mayor at the time when we established it. I do believe that Councilmember McNutt was actively involved at that time on the chamber, and it was her idea. And when it came to us, and it was Manager Fagoni at that time who was engaged, it was obvious that this was a program that needed chamber involvement. That was the outreach part. And as recent as this last graduating class, I had the opportunity to speak to the students that morning of the last session. And I have no question in my mind that the Chamber's activity in coordinating and facilitating this process goes way beyond the amount of money, relatively small amount of money that we're earmarking for its purposes. So I'd like to, basically champion the accolades and commend to the council that if we aren't familiar, we become more familiar with what the Chamber of Commerce does for our community and for us as a government entity.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I can personally vouch for the Chamber being a graduate of Leadership Los Gatos in 2008. I think, moving forward, maybe the thing to do would be to, obviously it's late in the game this year to, look at a $50,000 line item and question it, but perhaps going forward next year, we can compare the way other cities function and how their chambers are funded and how much funding they get per capita for their chambers. And I know that may not be relevant to the value we receive from our chamber per se, but it would be interesting information-wise for at least myself to know what other jurisdictions are contributing to their chambers and moving forward. So I'll be supporting the motion because I believe in the value that we're receiving, but I also would like moving forward to see more information in the future about the actual comparisons in other jurisdictions.
And just for clarification, you're supporting the motion even though the clarification in the future is not a part of it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Further discussion. Ms. Jensen.
I will support the motion, but while I appreciate my fellow council people's offer to help me with my homework, I've done my homework, thank you very much. But I think that the chamber should come forward with information, and it's fair for us to request that. And it's fair for us to request that of the staff, particularly when it's such a big budget item. And I think that we haven't been requesting that. So I don't think that's unreasonable to request that the chamber do that work. So I'll support the motion because we are far along in the process, and I understand that Leadership Los Gatos recruitment and signups may have started, so I have no interest in pulling the plug on that. I do think the chamber provides a valuable service, but the question for me is how valuable with respect to the town's budget, and I think it's fair for us to ask that question.
Thank you. Question of staff as far as process. I anticipate that there will be a follow-up motion to this one. Any problem procedurally with that?
It would be a motion presumably to direct staff to work with the chamber to provide additional information in the next budget process.
Something to that effect, yes. All right. Given the fact that there could be another motion, I'm going to also support this motion and wait until the next motion to get into that discussion. So all that being said, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there no further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Ms. Jensen.
And on cue, I'd like to adopt the language Mr. Larson just gave me for the additional motion to request that staff work with the chamber to provide that information that I've outlined, and additional information regarding cost for the town to take over those services, value that the services the chamber provides actually have, so we can put some kind of dollar amount when we consider our budgeting item next year. So my motion is to have staff both coordinate with chamber and for staff to return that information in addition to other financial analysis that we might need to properly and fully decide whether or not the amounts are correct that we're using, and Mr. Leonard's suggestion of examining practices in other jurisdictions. I would also like to add to that. So that would be my motion for our next budget session.
Have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Leonardis?
I'll second that. I just want a clarification that this would be the 2014-2015 budget.
Yes, I was going to ask clarification along the same line because our actual next budget session will be the first quarter budget review in December, and I meant, and I probably didn't say it, for the 14-15 budget, which would come to you in May.
That's what I intended.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll be supporting the motion. I also understand that this item was included in the town's budget. Maybe we need to think about having contracts before the budget. And I also understand that the chamber may have gone forward on the assumption that this was an approved item, and so maybe the chamber needs to think that through also. So I would suggest to both the town and the chamber that we get our timing better. And as was said in the making of this motion, I'll be looking, it could very well be that this 35,000 and this 15,000 are perfect numbers or inexpensive numbers, but the point is I don't know, and it's information that I would like to have and know. Further discussion. Mr. Brzezinski.
And I'm assuming I'm going to support the motion because I think more information is better than less. I'm not skeptical, but I do believe that it's essential for us to do our due diligence. And we actually may be surprised to find out that we're underpaying. And that's one of the potential consequences that this kind of an analysis might show. And I would recommend, therefore, that as we do this analysis going forward to 14-15, that we keep an open mind to the possibilities that it could be over or under.
Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I also will be supporting the motion as long as staff can reassure me that it's not going to take up $35,000 worth of staff time to produce, a 50-page report on the analysis of this on a $30 million budget. Can you reassure me on that? Oh,
$5,000.
Thank you.
And a further thing is that when this item is quantified for the next budget cycle, not only quantifying it, but giving thought to what, if any, portions can be brought in-house. So that's it. Anybody else? Seeing no one, have a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item 16. Adoption of a revised height pole and netting policy. Start with the staff report by Ms. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Before you tonight is the latest draft story pole policy that incorporates the changes recommended by council in April of this year. There's also some grammatical changes, and we included an illustration. There's also a desk item on this matter, which has some additional recommended changes to the policy, which further clarifies some potential interpretation issues. And that's it for the staff report, and we're available for questions.
Ms. Bailey, just for the sake of clarification, I don't want you to read the desk item, but can you, for the council and for the audience, just tell us what issues this desk item addresses within the staff report?
Yes, I can. One of the changes is under the location and number, which is on page 2, and that includes the discussion of architectural elements to, if they're visible from the streetscape, that those heights be included in the story poles analysis, and that would include towers, spires, elevator, mechanical penthouses, and those types of similar architectural detailing. We're also recommending that a definition section be added to ensure that the public as well as staff is under the same interpretation. There's a height definition, which is taken from the town code, and there's also a definition of roof line or edge, which is taken from our design standards. And lastly, we wanted some clarification on who is allowed to, what professional person is allowed to submit written verification for the height and story poles, and we reduced it to a licensed surveyor or civil engineer, and we've removed architect or building designer.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I might also comment, because staff has responded to a number of questions from the public and council, and I know in one of my responses I was reading off of the wrong version of the ordinance, and I did want to clarify, as we did in the desk item, that it's actually attachment 7 that is before you tonight at the end of the staff report. A looking very similar attachment 1 is immediately after the staff report, but that's what was presented to you in April, and attachment 7 incorporates your recommended changes after your review of attachment 1. So attachment 7 is the actual action before you tonight.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Bailey, in the amendment to 1 location and number in your desk item, you call out architectural elements, towers, spires, elevator, mechanical, penthouse, and so forth. Up to this point, I believe we have not included that. We've done all but. Now, correct that if I'm wrong. But the question is, first of all, have we done this in the past in any specific project? And second of all, is it realistic to expect that this can happen? Because as I look at most of our story pole examples, they are mass scale, height oriented, and the intent is for us to, first of all, notice our community that something's going to be built. Second of all, be able to establish a sense of height, mass, scale, visual impacts, and so forth. And we're adding this piece with towers, spires, elevator, mechanical. So from the perspective of just engineering itself, is this a realistic expectation?
Typically, these are used for commercial developments that you would have these elements in, and mechanical equipment screening that is part of the building, like a mansard type roof, that is required to be part of the height analysis.
Right.
So that would be included. So that's not an uncommon feature. Elevators, typically those are an architectural tower, something that's incorporated within a development, like Old Town has an elevator as part of their building. So that's part of their architectural design, so that has been included. If it's a mechanical equipment, usually those are put in a portion of the roof that the architects try not to have be visible, and then those are included with mechanical screens. They're usually set back. But you are correct that if they were closer or visible to the streetscape, that would potentially be difficult to illustrate. In terms of towers and spires, I'm not sure if the existing Netflix building was required to show that feature that they have or not, but due to public concerns, we thought it would be important to incorporate that, and they could always ask for an exception to the policy.
I'm more talking to just the practical nature of being able to do this, so that I'm not questioning the intent, but how is it that when you're using, let's say, 2x4 or whatever materials we are using to frame this in, and then the netting, how is it that then we actually can insert towers and those other types of structures that's now being called out in this language?
They could incorporate additional posts within the existing story pole frame to show that additional projection.
Okay, so you don't see it as a issue that would be practically difficult to achieve?
I think it's possible, but again, if there's a difficulty that an architect has, that it could be part of their exception request.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, it wouldn't be the architect, right? It would be under your proposed change, it would be the engineer?
Well, that's true, but that is the one that would actually be doing the surveying to determine it's in the correct location.
All right, thank you. Other questions of staff? Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. So my concern is on the length of time that the height poles and the netting stay in place. And the way it reads right now is it stays in place until, and this is on page 2 of the proposed language, that it stays in place until the project has been acted upon and the appeals period has ended. So what happens, not too frequently, but it does happen, is we'll have a project, it comes to Planning Commission, so the story poles go up, it comes to Planning Commission, there might be 2 or 3 meetings, so it drags on for several months. Planning Commission makes a decision, it gets appealed, or it automatically comes to the council. The council sends it back to Planning Commission. The applicant loses interest, loses money, is bewildered, they don't know what they want to do, time passes, and you have a situation where we could have story poles up for, as happened in a neighborhood very close to this location, for over 2 years. I don't think that's what the neighbors are going to want or appreciate. So I don't know what language can be put in there so that when you end up into, like Bella Vista, a project up in Bella Vista, which I think is still pending, I think they've taken down the story poles, but according to this language, those story poles should still be up there while the applicant gets itself together for the next round. I think we need some language in there that makes it go away for a while when it's in that extended pending folder.
Staff, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. We could look at 2 options. One could be to define what an acting permit is. So as long as an applicant is being proactive and moving the project along, if we can come up with a definition of what that is, that could be the exception for them to be allowed to stay up. That's the one I can think of right now.
And I thought of one other, so we are getting to, which is there could be a line added giving staff discretion to require the removal of story poles if it is not an active application moving to final resolution, probably with the line that the applicant could appeal that decision to council.
And to add to that, we could also, if the applicant submits revised plans and it is a totally different project that you know they're going to have different story poles, staff can require them to remove the poles.
Well, I have a question because it shall remain until the appeal has been acted upon. What I hear staff now describing is a project that is outside the parameters of an appeal. Am I missing something?
Interpretation would be that when the project has been decided upon. So if the appeal was remanded back, then that really hasn't been the decision of the project hasn't been finalized. It's still at a continued type status.
Mr. Larson?
Yes. Using the example provided by Councilmember McNutt, a project is approved or denied at the Planning Commission, appealed to council. Council hears the appeal and acts on it and sends it back to PC. I don't think it was our intention that that's the point at which the story poles can come down because a decision has not been reached. But by interpreting it as staff would, as Ms. Bailey just indicated, that it's no final decision has been reached because it's been remanded back to PC, we'd be waiting for that PC action, but you could have transfer of property, economic conditions, whatever, make that a 6-month delay before the Planning Commission ever hears the remand back from council, which could leave the story poles up for no purpose.
I'm going to suggest, since we're still at staff questioning and I have public input that I know I will be getting, that you consider something. Other questions of staff? Ms. Jensen.
I apologize. This isn't really a question. It's sort of a follow-up, and as you're considering writing something, two things that were said concerned me. One was that you give the applicant a chance to appeal, but not the public. That concerns me. Secondly, that oftentimes we all know that between Planning Commission and Town Council, a project can be substantially changed. And if the project is substantially changed, the story poles should now be changed to reflect that.
I believe Ms. Bailey addressed the second point, and the reason I only include the applicant for the appeal is that I saw the action being staff saying, tear down the story poles, and the applicant saying, no, I'm going in next week.
I can't imagine that the applicant would ever not want to tear them down. I can't imagine the public wanting them to stay up.
All right, before we get into any back and forth, other questions of staff? All right, see none. This is a public hearing. I have one card. If anyone else wants to address us on this agenda item, please submit a card. John Shepherdson. Mr. Shepherdson, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. John Shepherdson, 120 Oak Rim.
Mr. Shepherdson, put the mic a little closer to you, please.
Or I'll step. Is
Step
that better?
closer. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. First, I'm always nervous when I speak before the council. It's like there's multiple judges, so if I seem nervous, I am, and if I don't seem nervous, I really am. First thing I want to do is I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, and Councilmember Leonardis for really provoking the questions on this policy. And I think questioning things is a good thing for business and government, whether it's been for a long time or a short period of time. And I did provide an email to the council and the manager with respect to my comments about the story power policy. It came in late this evening, so I will briefly comment on those. One is, I think, in the purpose language of the story power policy, I would suggest that there should be some language that the story poll policy is vital in terms of communicating to the public and to all the decision makers, but also to the public, that we have a strong story poll policy. I think it encourages people to get involved in government when they see that there is changes going on. I saw language that says that there may be a story poll plan, and I wasn't sure why we are saying may. Are we going to have one or not? Some language, I would suggest that along the lines that the larger the project, the more important the story poll policy, and that there be language that that's particularly true with high-density residential and commercial projects, because in my experience, that's where we seem to have most of the concern about the story poll policy. And I will comment in terms of the language about they should go up and stay up. I would remind the council that with the Swanson project, they went up and they went down. And the developer said they didn't have the money, and we did not follow the policy. I also have some language that say within 7 days of the erection of the story poll policy that there should be some verification, so there should be some time limit on that. And then on the roof lines, I suggest language that the roof line should include the highest roof lines. And with that, I thank you.
I submitted a card.
If I can turn this on. Are you going to address us on this item?
Yeah, I submitted a card already.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to second most of what John has already stated, and then I'd like to add that I'm glad you pointed out that Attachment 7 was the actual ordinance. I was getting confused on that. Thank you for including referral to the council for any exception. I do have a question as to whether that will be referred to the council under a public hearing or as other business. And if it's referred as other business, I would suggest that it be advertised in the What's New section so that the public can be aware that the hearing will be taking place. I also agree that the larger the project, the more important it is that there be story polls to show the full extent of the project and the apparent density of it. I agree with what Councilman Brzezinski said about the purpose of story polls, to inform the public and to show the height, math, and scale, to assess the visual impact of a project. And I therefore don't understand why we are including that story polls are not considered as part of CEQA, since they are the best visual assessment of visual impacts. And I guess I probably have more, but that's enough.
Thank you. Questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. All right. I don't think I have any other cards, at least I don't see any here. Anyone else wishing to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public input part of this hearing and turn to the council members for questions, motion, or discussion. Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I am curious whether staff has come up with some language, and I just when I was looking at the purpose section again, when Mr. Shepherdson was up there, I noticed it says active development application, and so maybe there's some definition of active development that would take care of those that go into pending, so that those story poles are not left up there for 2 years. And I also, on a separate, while they're still thinking about that, on a separate matter, this wasn't a question for staff, but a question for council. Currently, on sign content, over on page 7, it says that new single-family homes are not required to provide a rendering on the sign. And I believe as a vice mayor was brought this up before, and I remember the conversation on remodel, and I guess it included new homes also. But I'm wondering if we really want to do that, because tonight we just approved a zone change, and we're going to have 2 homes be proposed for a high visibility location on Los Gatos Boulevard. I think people who live in that neighborhood and who drive by are going to be very curious about what's being proposed, and just having a sign there and saying you can go down to Town Hall and see it is not as effective as requiring them to have a rendering, which their architect is already going to have. So I don't see it being a big cost item for a developer or resident who's building a new single-family home. So I think we should include, take that part out and just keep it to remodels that don't need to have renderings. So those are my 2 concerns, is not leaving up story poles for 2 years, as happened in my neighborhood, and the single-family rendering.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Brzezinski.
I'd like to reinforce this last comment from Councilwoman McNutt. There's a home that's going to be built in my neighborhood, and the architectural rendering, the first run, was kind of a Spanish colonial, and the second turned out to be a craftsman. But that wasn't able to be discovered by whatever was posted by anyone who would observe this. And so I'm thinking that for sake of full disclosure, particularly given the fact this is the responsibility of the developer, some visual representation of what the actual architecture will look like, combined with the story poles for a residential property, I think has some merit to consider. And I would like to see us come to some agreement that would allow or expect that would happen. Because, I mean, as pointed out, these 2 houses that are going to be built on the boulevard, high visibility and architecture will be so significant, and it would be good since we're trying to trigger a response from our community to allow people to actually have that kind of visible awareness when they take a look at the property.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Just to comment on what Council Members McNutt and Brzezinski said. My recollection of the discussion was we didn't want it to be too burdensome on the individual homeowner to have to pay the cost to put up the rendition. And I agree with what Councilmember McNutt said. Their architect may already have that. With regards to the project on the boulevard, they're going to be tearing down 2 office buildings and putting up 2 homes. So to me, something like that may be more appropriate for full color signage of what will be going in there, what it will look like, as opposed to the individual homeowner who maybe starts out with a colonial and then it turns into a, craftsman. Only because in that case, as long as the height and the ridge lines and everything are depicted by the story poles, it doesn't matter so much what the look of the house is going to be to individuals. I mean, yes, they're curious, they can go and look at it downtown, but the fact that they have to spend the extra expense to post the look of the house, I think, is less important than when somebody is doing a development where they're doing, say, 2 or more houses, or they're taking one lot and splitting it into 3 and putting 3 homes there. So I agree more disclosure is good, but I don't want it to be too burdensome on the individual homeowners who are trying to build their home in Los Gatos. I quite honestly am very happy with the results and the work that staff did on this story pole policy, taking into consideration some of the comments of the public. I was looking at page 3, the story pole plan and public safety, and it talks about the story pole plan shall include the methods used to secure the poles. Essentially, it's basically saying, there will be a story pole plan. It's not a matter of there may be a story pole plan. So that's the way I'm interpreting it. As far as the depiction of the highest roof lines, I think that point is covered, provided, as Ms. Bailey said earlier, that they can be depicted with individual framing. So that's my understanding of the way it's always been. They're going to depict every ridge, the highest ridge on the project, provided that it's practicable, if that's a word. So I'm willing to move forward and adopt this as written with no changes. So I guess that would be my motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Leonardis. Are you including in your motion the desk item?
I would include the desk item as well as the attachment number 7 as part of that motion.
All right, and before we get to whether or not there's a second, Mr. Larson, are you going to add anything?
We do have some language as requested by the mayor to share with the council, if you wish.
If you would, before we see if we have a second.
Okay. On page 2 of attachment 7, it's actually technically page 2 of exhibit A of attachment 7, but it's page 2 of the policy under residential. The last bolded line would be modified to read, if the project is appealed, the height poles and netting shall remain until final action is taken. If final consideration of the project is substantially delayed or the project substantially modified, staff may direct removal or modification of the story poles. The only other point, I think, following on Ms. Bailey's comment, the active application, I think that reference in the preface gives staff the opportunity to come up with administrative guidelines for how we define an active application. A new submittal or a hearing scheduled every 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, that would be a staff assessment rather than trying to do that on the fly tonight.
All right, we would have we have a motion. First of all, Mr. Leonardis, would you accept staff's modification?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a
Second.
second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. See none, we have discussion. Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just give it one more shot to see whether or not the maker of the motion would want to modify the language on page 7 and about new family reconstruction and just have remodels not required to provide a rendering on a sign.
Do we have any response?
I guess, the way I feel about it is we have a lot of disclosure, and more disclosure is good. We have our A&S process. We have, obviously, the story poles. Folks know what's going on. If it's close to them, they know they get the postcard in the mail and they can attend the public hearing. So we have a lot of disclosure. My only purpose is that I don't want it to be burdensome on the individual homeowner or the family to have to pay. It's already so expensive to build in new construction, to have to pay for an extra sign, however much that would cost. So again, if it were somebody who would be, we've changed the zoning and they're taking down 2 office buildings and putting up 2 homes, it is a good idea for the public to see what will be going there. But when it comes to the individual homeowner, same as the individual homeowner doing their remodel, I just don't want it to be financially burdensome, because I feel like we have a lot of checks and balances in place already that are very good. So I don't know how we put that into a motion. That's my hesitancy.
All right, right now the motion stands, and paragraph E, sign content, has not been modified. Mr. Larson.
Ms. Bailey and I were just discussing, and we think that language that's been discussed could be subject to some confusion and misinterpretation, in that it was our assessment the way the language is now, the project you just approved, the 2 offices becoming 2 homes, would not be required to provide renderings under the way this is worded currently. So that if that is the intent of the motion maker, it might be possible to say standalone new single-family construction and remodeling is not required to provide a rendering on the sign, or single lot, single-family homes and remodeling. Pardon? But it's being subbed to Bill 2. Yeah. So the 2 coming in separately wouldn't have to do the signs, but if it's a development, just trying to provide alternative on the fly here, given the motion maker's comments.
All right, well, I'm not so sure how clear that is, but it's not my motion. So, Mr. Leonardis, do you want to change paragraph E, sign content, as somewhat stated by staff?
I think the key word was standalone. For instance, if we go back to the same example that we spoke about earlier this evening, it could be the intention of the developer to bulldoze the office buildings, split it into 2 lots, map out the lots, and then just sell the lots to individual homeowners, and they would go ahead and hire their own architects. We don't know what the intention is. So I guess the key word is standalone. I think that is key. When it is an individual family or somebody that's looking to build their own home, and it's a standalone case, I don't really want to add an extra step for them, although I know the technology is there, and maybe it'll cost a lot of money, maybe it won't cost a lot of money. I guess it depends on who you hire, but I really feel like we have that point covered with our current processes. So,
all right, right now the motion stands. E is not modified. Does staff want to weigh in on it?
We have a simple suggestion going forward. That line would now read, new single-family standalone construction is not required to provide a rendering on the sign.
I will ask the maker of the motion if he agrees to that modification.
Before I do, I think Council Member Jensen had some.
Well, no.
No? Okay.
I'm not going to do that.
Well, I would definitely agree to the language of
okay. Mr. Brzezinski.
I have a question of clarification. So, by your recommendation, new single-family construction standalone would not be. Would you please read that again? Because I'm trying to understand exactly what this supposedly looks like on the ground.
New single-family standalone construction is not required to provide a rendering on the sign.
And what does standalone mean in this context?
That would be that it would be a single house on a separate parcel that's coming in on its own as its own application. Whereas if you have like the Swanson development where there's maybe several detached homes, that's not a standalone. Those are numerous single-family homes as one project. Now, what's tricky about the zone change application tonight is those actually right now are 2 separate lots. And they could potentially come in separately to be developed, or they could come in at once with 2 separate applications. But with this interpretation, since if they came in at the same time, they probably would be heard at the same time and move through the process, then we could interpret that not to be a standalone.
All right. Mr. Brzezinski,
Yeah, so,
does that answer your question?
Well, I think it does. I don't necessarily think it satisfies my initial concern, because if we're looking at, let's say, a tear down, and we do every once in a while have one where you scrape the lot. I mean, that to me is what's going to come next is going to be really different than just a remodel. Because a remodel, you already have pretty much the project in place. So now you're doing is either you're adding a second story or you're expanding or something. But when you've got something that is a complete new start, I do believe, and as the seconder of the motion, I may have to withdraw that second, and someone else may be able to get in and take that from me. But I do believe there is a value. I accept the fact that it may be somewhat more expensive, but the cost to the neighborhood could be even more significant when there is a proposal that comes in front of us that the neighbors have not really had the opportunity to weigh in on. And I grant everyone should get down here and take a look if they see something going on in their neighborhood. But it seems like a simple step to have that rendering placed on the notice, and I can't see that as being an exceptional cost factor for the owner.
So, Mr. Brzezinski, is your second stand, or are you withdrawing it?
Since we've had this discussion, I think I'll withdraw the second.
All right,
Let
the
someone else take
second
that.
has been withdrawn. We have a motion. Is there a second? Seeing none, we have no motion on the table. May I have a new motion? Ms. McNutt.
Okay, I'll give it a try. So I will move approval of the proposed language with the inclusion of the additional sentence referring to how long the story poles have to stay up that staff came up with, and changing on page 7, section E, the sentence taking out new single-family, new construction, and just having it say single-family remodel projects are not required to provide a rendering on the sign.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Jensen, is that a second?
I'll second it, yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So we have a motion on the table. Discussion. All right. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're going to agenda item 14. This is an amendment to the Town Council agenda format and rule policy to establish timelines for submission of information for and distribution of agenda packets, addendums, and desk items for council meetings.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council.
I was just going to say, Ms. Jacobs is making the staff report. Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. The council had requested the Council Policy Committee to look at setting deadlines for the submission of material for desk items and subsequent distribution of desk items to the council to enable the council to have adequate time to review the desk items. The council policy discussed this and are recommending a new policy tonight to council that would set the deadline for desk items. Staff is also recommending a similar deadline for the 2 other distribution steps in the agenda packet, just for consistency. What the policy before you would require is for the public to have a deadline of 11 a.m. on council packet Thursdays, addendum Fridays, and desk item Mondays, sometimes Tuesdays if council meeting is on a Tuesday, to submit comments for the council's consideration. The council would have a deadline of 7 a.m. on Monday morning or the day of the council meeting to submit their questions or issues for the staff to include and address in desk items. The desk items would then be distributed to the council by 1 p.m. on council meeting dates. And any council questions after 7 a.m. would be addressed as possible in during the discussion of the council item at the council meeting. And any public comment received after 11 a.m. on the day of the council meeting would not be included in the desk item. However, the public could come to the meeting and provide the information to council for council's consideration. We did have a question that I would like to answer here for everyone, asking when the public does have access to staff reports and addendums and desk items. The public has access to the council packets by 10 a.m. on Friday mornings. They have access to, and this is by posting online, they have access to the addendums by about 5 p.m. on Fridays, if there's an addendum. And they have access to the desk items soon after they are distributed to the council via email. They are posted online, so they do have access fairly quickly after the council sees the material.
And I could also, one other comment that came in was about staff packaging the public comments, and that was not meant in any manipulative way, but simply taking the documents that come in by 11 and packaging them as attachments to the desk item that goes to council.
And
Thank you, Ms. Prop.
Thank you. And just for clarification, the packets are always available here at Town Hall, the physical packets, as soon as they're available to the council. So the times that Ms. Jacobs was mentioning was when they would be available and uploaded electronically because of staff time to do that. But certainly when they're made available to the council, they're also made available as a public packet at Town Hall.
Thank you. Further staff report, Ms.
Yes,
Jacobs?
I'll just finish by saying that if the council were to approve the policy this evening, that staff would implement a communication plan for the public, and that would include a number of ways to let the public know about the deadlines through the town's website, what's new, frequently asked questions, placards on the council chamber, the lobby table, and then public counters. And we would do a press release to let the public know. And not included in the staff report, but part of that communication would be to advise the public that it would be best to submit their comments to either the generic council email address or the generic manager email address to ensure that they get to us by 11 a.m. And I would be happy to answer any further questions.
All right, questions of staff. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one time issue I'm curious about is the fourth bullet on page 2. Council questions and comments addressed by staff and desk items submitted by 7 a.m. I'm picturing then we will have a staff member here in the morning to pick up all of those memos, emails. Pamela Jacobs will be the one.
Ms. Jacobs' cell phone will be on.
Excellent.
No.
If I could just have some clarification, why that particular time, let's say, rather than 9 o'clock when we actually have staff who are able to respond?
The committee could discuss as well. The real notion was Sunday night, but as staff was thinking about it and talked it over with the committee, we realized email communications that came in, if a council member so wished, overnight or by the next morning with questions, if they were in by 7 a.m., it's no different than if they were in by midnight the night before from a staff processing point of view in terms of getting the work assigned out so we can have answers to as many questions as possible to council by 1 p.m. So it was really recognizing, largely due to email. Now, I'm not sure how many of us you'll reach at 5 in the morning if you want to do oral phone calls, but if it's scheduled, we'll be there.
Okay, so you're committing to be available at 5 in the morning.
If I'm given 4 notice.
Excellent, excellent.
So, Mr. Brzezinski, was your question about 7 a.m. answered?
Yes, it was. I understand it. I don't oppose it. I guess my thought would be a more normal time would be 9 o'clock on Monday morning. But I also understand that this is, for purposes of submitting actual hard copy in a desk item and to the council through email. So that's acceptable.
All right, further discussion or questions of Ms. Jensen?
I also have a timing question. If it is the case that on the day of the meeting, the council gives you our questions by 7 a.m. and you respond by 1 p.m., yet the public is required to give their input at 11 a.m., how are they responding to what the council got at, how are they able to respond to what the council got at 1 p.m.?
It is a sequential iterative process that occurs throughout, from the staff report through the addendum, through the desk item, through the council meeting. And a council member raising an issue after the public comment has closed doesn't afford the public opportunity to respond to that issue, which is no different, and it's just a writing deadline earlier. Otherwise, we'd have an infinite iterative loop of comments already being allowed and never getting to closure. So.
Further questions? Thank you. Now, this is a public hearing, and I have one card submitted. Anyone else wishing to address us, please submit a card. I have a card from Lee Quintana. Lee, you have 3 minutes.
Lee Quintana, I also submitted some comments in writing to you, along with the comments that I made, excuse me, on agenda item 1. Basically, I would like to plead for the public a later time deadline on the day of the hearing, because as Councilperson Jensen pointed out, it doesn't give the public the opportunity to respond to the questions that were asked by council and answered. And I'm assuming that that's part of the packet, so that would be part of the public record. So there is a difference between the way questions from the public are handled and questions from council are handled, in that clearly the correspondence from the public is just simply passed on. It's not, if questions are raised, it's not answered. And there already is such little time for the public to respond and to items, especially if they're compulsive like I am and want to respond on more than one item on the agenda. I think this forecloses that opportunity for the public, especially when most people will only access the information or the packet when it becomes available online. So there's very little time when the public can actually come in, ask questions of staff, get things clarified, and then write their comments if they want to write comments. Otherwise, they're writing comments not necessarily based on fact, but misunderstanding. So I plead for at least the day of the council meetings that desk items from the public be received as they are now until 3 p.m.
All right. Do we have anybody else? First of all, questions for Ms. Quintana? Seeing none. Does anyone else from the public wish to address us on this agenda item? Having no cards, seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public input to this hearing and look to the council for discussion, questions, or motion. Ms. Jensen.
I apologize to my fellow council people and staff, but I have to make this speech because I believe it very strongly. The reason to have a council meeting is to get input from the public, information, and include the public in our discussion. I understand that there is a value in having time to review something thoroughly and completely. However, if that precludes inclusion of information or input by the public, it's a bad thing. I would never make the call to balance efficiency over inclusion. I can imagine under these deadlines that if one were to go away on Friday morning, say for ski trip on President's Weekend, you would not get the council packet. You could not respond by Monday because you come back on okay, it's a Tuesday meeting, but let's imagine you came back on Monday. You haven't seen that information online. You're not coming back in time for the council meeting, so you cannot make that presentation personally. Your input is now precluded, and I don't think that's a policy that we should be making. I think we should always err on the side of receiving information. It may be a bit more of a headache, but it's valuable, and we need to take it into account. So I'm sorry I can't support the policy. I understand some of the arguments for it, but I think it's very important for us to get the input. And I also think there may be an argument that's made, well, it doesn't preclude input. It does if you can't come to the meeting on the Monday night, number one. And number two, it gives the indication that the input is not going to be considered. So even if we say, well, you can come or it's not going to be included in the packet, my difficulty is it chills the public in coming forward with their information because they feel like it's being precluded. So for example, right now the email response that goes out to members of the public is if they send in something or other on our email, it says, we're sorry this isn't going to be included because you missed the deadline. It doesn't say, but, maybe you can give it to us or something. It does go on and say, well, yeah, maybe you can come or maybe it won't be in the packet. But the way it reads, if I'm not familiar with the process, it really looks like I missed the deadline. So my concern with having a policy that has deadlines is it certainly looks to be a cutoff of information. And I can't support it. I'm sorry. I'm willing to read what the public wants to give me. I know it's inconvenient. I know it's inefficient, but process can be messy, and we just need to accept that. So that's my speech. Thank you very much.
Further discussion? Well, I will do my speech, except I don't have one yet. But my thoughts in bringing and being one of the people to bring this forward was not because of necessarily because of efficiency or headaches, but for me it was more an issue of due process. I'm one of the 5 people who is called upon to make a decision, and if I'm getting materials up until the time that I'm sitting up here at the dais, I don't have the opportunity to fully consider them, and I want to fully consider everything that I get, and I do. I'm one of those people who reads the materials, and I read them the second I get them, and I read them all weekend, and I will read them till the time I get them. But if I'm getting them at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the day of the meeting, I can't give them due consideration. So this policy allows the council, this person here, and I believe other council people, to consider the materials, all materials with due process. That does not mean that if someone has thoughts after 11 a.m., that those thoughts are not amenable to consideration by the council, because they can be considered by virtue of being at our council meeting. Do I know that there might be times that a person can't be at a council meeting? Yes. But overall, do I believe that a process that helps assure due process by the entire public, including the council, is the process by which I weigh in favor of this policy? Yes. Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes. All due respect to Councilwoman Jensen's position, I have to agree with the mayor. I think that we are a very open legislative body when it comes to soliciting and and accepting public input. I think we do value it significantly. I think we've demonstrated that time and time again in this chamber. But that last minute email that comes a half hour before the meeting starts really does a disservice to the council, but also to the individual who's making that recommendation. If things are that important, then you have to make arrangements to be here. If you can't get that message to us within these timeframes as proposed by the committee. And that would probably not be the weekend to go skiing then, if it's that significant. I would say that it would be really important for everyone to take advantage of the opportunities we offer so that we can get good input at the appropriate time so that our decision-making can be shaped by that input. And I don't think it's that much, it isn't asking that much of adults in particular to formulate their thoughts and get those thoughts included at an appropriate time so that the council can consider those without having to see a stack of desk items that we have to look at in haste. Again, it doesn't do us a service, and I don't think it does the person who's making the recommendation a service. So I agree with the mayor, and I think that the committee's recommendations are wise, and it still leaves the opportunity for a person to stand in front of us at the microphone and present that case. And you know how much we do pay attention and focus on that and include that in our deliberation. So I am going to support this particular amendment to the agenda format and rules policy.
Further discussion, Ms. McNutt?
Thank you, Mayor. The two most important parts of this for me is, one, having enough time so that we can really pay attention to what the public is giving to us. We've had several instances over the last few months where I remember there was one where we had like 100 pages of desk items given to us at like 6:45. Well, you can't absorb that, and so residents have spent a whole lot of time putting together complicated analysis and attaching reports and things like that they think we should look at, and it's like we can't do anything with that to have that at that point in time. And it was also very important to me to have a time when I know the desk items are going to arrive in my computer, because I don't do this full time. I have a full-time job and I have to manage my time during the day. So knowing that on council days at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I need to carve out time to read and think about the desk items was very important. If this was a full-time gig, that would be a different thing. But this is what we do for our living, for our job. So I think this is a good recommendation. The one thing I did want to point out is that it does say potentially notation on council agendas. I think it's mandatory that it be a notation on council agendas along with the other directions to the public that we have in the preamble here before it starts, so that it's very clear if someone is picking up an agenda or they're looking online and seeing it for the first time and spotting something of interest to them, that it's very clear. If you want to comment on this, here are your options. You can come in person that night, you can bring materials with you, you can submit something in writing ahead of time, and here are the time frames that are your opportunities to do that.
Ms. McNutt, for clarification, you said there was something that you thought should be different. To what are you making reference?
I'm sorry, it's on page 3 of the staff report. It's the last bullet under the communication plan. It says potentially notation on council agendas.
Right.
So
Staff?
it's not part of the policy, it would simply be direction to staff to include that notation.
And so potentially was because it wasn't part of the proposed policy?
It was really council's input as to whether you thought that it should be included. There is a lot on the agenda. I wanted you all to weigh in on whether you think that was important to put on the agenda. So thank you.
All right, we don't have a motion. May we have a motion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Just want to weigh in on how I feel about this, being on the council for 3 years. You know, in most instances, the old policy works fine, and the new policy would work equally as fine. I think it's those issues that people are very passionate about, as Councilmember McNutt described, where you get 100 emails at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever, or 5 minutes, 15 minutes before the meeting, and those can't possibly be read. But at the same time, people still feel as though they have a voice and they are submitting it. I guess my biggest concern is we're going to have to communicate this with the public. I also was curious about the previous policy and why it was adopted and the deadlines were adopted the way they were. I see both points of view on this, and as I said earlier, I don't really. In most instances, I don't really feel like this is an issue, but there are those issues when it could become problematic just from the sheer volume. We can't possibly get to all of it and weigh in on all of it. But I'm on the fence as far as, I guess I'll have to believe in the faith of the committee that put this together. And leaning towards voting yes on this.
Further discussion, a motion? Mr. Przynski.
Madam Mayor, I would like to make a motion to adopt the amendments to the Town Council agenda format and rules policy to establish timelines for submission of information for and distribution of agenda packets, addendums, and desk items for council meetings as so proposed.
Do we have a second? Ms. McNutt?
I'll second, although it's coming from recommendation of a subcommittee, so I'm not sure it requires a second, but according to procedure. But I don't know, I'll just second it.
Just second it.
Okay, I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. Ms. Jensen voting no. And meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.